The rain didn't care about the little girl crouching in the mud. It came down hard and indifferent, soaking through her jacket, the jacket she'd already taken off her own shoulders and wrapped around her 5-year-old brother, who sat motionless in a wheelchair with a broken wheel held together by electrical tape. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't throwing herself in front of traffic. She was just whispering, "Sir, please help my brother. He's cold. He's hungry. And I don't know what to do anymore." 10 years old, alone on a forgotten road at midnight. And every car before his had driven straight past her. Every single one. If you've ever wondered what it costs to stop this, is that story. Subscribe to the channel and follow this story all the way through, because I promise you, the ending will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Hit the like button, drop a comment with your city and country. I want to see how far this story travels. Don't miss what's coming next. The truck's headlights caught her at the worst possible angle. Ethan Walker saw the glare off wet asphalt, first the kind of sheeting rain that turns everything into abstraction, that makes a country road look like the bottom of a river. His wipers were working hard and losing. The defroster had stopped doing much around mile 40, and the cab smelled like wet dog and old coffee and the specific exhaustion of a man who had been driving since before noon with no particular destination in mind. He wasn't running from anything. That's what he told himself. He was just driving. The way some men read or drink or disappear into work, Ethan drove. Long hauls through counties he didn't know, with the radio off and Ranger asleep in the back seats, and nothing between him and whatever thoughts decided to show up. Tonight those thoughts had been the usual inventory, the kind that came without warning and stayed too long. He wasn't thinking about the little girl until Ranger woke up. The dog didn't bark. That would have been too easy, too cinematic, a loyal K9 sounding the alarm like something out of a training video. What Ranger actually did was lift his big square head from the seat cushion, ears going rigid, and let out a single low sound that wasn't quite a whine and wasn't quite a growl. It was the sound Ethan had learned over 7 years of working alongside that dog in conditions that would strip the paint off a nice narrative, meant something is wrong and you need to pay attention right now. Ethan's foot came off the gas before his brain fully caught up. Truck slowed. The headlights swept left as he eased onto the gravel shoulder of a roadside market that had probably been someone's livelihood 20 years ago, and was now just a shuttered building with a rustling and a hand-painted sign, so faded you couldn't read what it had once advertised. A single overhead security light flickered above the entrance, one of those bulbs that's given up on its own death and just keeps sputtering along on pure stubbornness. In the yellow-gray edge of that light, he saw them. The girl was crouched beside the wheelchair, with her back to the road, her body curled slightly forward in that posture children adopt when they're trying to make themselves small enough to disappear. Her hair was soaked flat against the back of her neck. Her arms were wrapped around the handles of the wheelchair, not pushing, just holding on, the way a person holds on to something when there's nothing else left to hold. The boy in the chair wasn't moving. Ethan's hand was on the door handle before the truck had fully stopped. He'd spent 11 years in the Navy, 8 of them in the teams. He'd walked into rooms he knew were going to be bad and done it anyway, because training has a way of eating the hesitation out of you. Particular quality of dread he felt stepping out onto that wet gravel that was something different. That wasn't tactical. That was just human. He left the engine running, left the headlights on. "Stay," he told Ranger. "Then quieter, I'll be right back." He walked toward them slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible and his movements unhurried. The rain hit the back of his neck and ran down his collar. He got within maybe 15 feet before the girl heard the crunch of gravel and spun around. She moved faster than he expected, put herself between him and the wheelchair like a wall, arms slightly out, chin up. Her eyes were red from crying, but they were sharp, scanning him the way someone scans a threat. Not the eyes of a helpless child, the eyes of someone who had been burned before by people who stopped. "Don't come closer," she said. Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. Ethan stopped, kept his hands where she could see them. "I'm not going to." She stared at him. Rain ran down her face. "I'm not going to come closer," he said again. "I just want to make sure you're okay." We're fine. The boy in the wheelchair made a small sound barely audible over the rain and shifted in the seat. His head lolled to one side. He wasn't unconscious. Ethan could see that now, but he was cold enough that he was losing the fight to hold himself upright. He doesn't look fine, Ethan said. Not cruel about it, just honest. The girl's jaw tightened. I said we're fine. What's his name? That caught her off guard. She'd expected argument or pity or someone reaching for a phone to call someone. Not that Noah, she said after a moment. How old is he? 5. How long have you been out here? She didn't answer. That was an answer. Ethan crouched down, brought himself below her eye level, which was a thing he'd learned a long time ago. In interrogations, in negotiations, in the middle of situations that could go either direction depending on who blinked first. Getting small was sometimes the only card you had. My name is Ethan, he said. I'm not a cop. I'm not anyone official. I was just driving, and my dog, his name is Ranger, he heard something and made me stop. I'm going to be honest with you. Because you look like someone who can tell when people are lying, I don't know exactly what I can do for you tonight, but I'd like to try. Okay? The girl looked at him for a long time. He'd been looked at by village elders in places that didn't appear on civilian maps, by men who were deciding whether to shoot him, by commanding officers who thought he was wrong about something he was absolutely not wrong about. He'd learned to hold very still under that kind of scrutiny. Finally, she said, his wheelchair wheel is broken. He can't get warm if he can't move. I can see that. Can I look at it? Another pause. Then don't touch him. I won't. He stood slowly and approached the wheelchair, circling wide so he came at it from the front so she could watch his face the whole time. The boy Noah watched him too. Big dark eyes and a pale face, cheeks raw from the cold. He had a thin blanket pulled up to his chin, the girl's jacket underneath it. Ethan could see the collar poking out. The broken wheel was the rear left. Someone had wound black electrical tape around the axle joint where the housing had cracked, enough to hold it together under normal conditions, but nowhere near enough for a wet road and any kind of real distance. How far did you push him like this? Ethan asked. Far enough, the girl said. He straightened up and looked at her directly. What's your name? Why? Because I'd like to call you something other than hey. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but a small involuntary relaxation around the eyes, the kind that happens before a person has time to stop it. Lily, she said, Lily. He nodded. Got some tools in the truck. I can't fix the wheel permanently tonight. I don't have the right parts. But I can stabilize it well enough that it won't collapse if we move him. And I've got heat in the truck and food and dry blankets. None of this requires you to trust me completely. You can keep looking at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now, the whole time. She was quiet. But Noah's going to get hypothermic if he stays out here much longer, Ethan said. And I don't think you came this far just to let that happen. Lily Carter had been taking care of Noah for longer than most people would believe if she told them, so she generally didn't. She'd learned early that the truth, the full truth, the unedited version made adults uncomfortable in a specific way, which was the way that preceded them making phone calls and writing things down on clipboards and separating her from her brother while they figured out the best course of action. She had learned that best course of action was adult language for the thing that's easiest for us. She was 10 years old, and she had already developed, through pure necessity, the kind of situational awareness that some grown men spend careers trying to acquire. She watched the man named Ethan move back to his truck. He moved differently from most men she'd encountered, unhurried, but not slow, contained, like someone who had been trained to be very aware of his own body and space. He didn't slam the truck door when he opened it. He didn't make sudden movements. He returned with a basic toolkit, a military-style flashlight, and a small canvas bag, and he set all of it down on the gravel about 4 feet from Noah's wheelchair rather than walking directly up, showing her where everything was before he used it. She noticed that. The dog Ranger was watching through the rear window of the truck. A Belgian Malinois, she thought, though she wasn't sure. He looked serious and calm at the same time, which felt appropriate given his owner. You were military, she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan glanced up from the flashlight he was clicking on. What gave it away? The way you move at the dog. Smart. He returned his attention to the wheel joint. Navy SEAL teams for about 8 years. Retired 14 months ago. He ran the light along the axle. Before you ask, yes, it messes with your head. No, I'm not going to talk about it with a 10-year-old at midnight in the rain. Despite everything, despite the cold, the exhaustion, the low-grade terror that had become so constant, she sometimes forgot it was terror and just thought of it as life. Lily almost laughed. Came out as a short, involuntary breath through her nose. I wasn't going to ask, she said. Good. He produced a small ratchet and a length of steel wire from the kit. Talk to me about something else. How long has this wheel been like this? 3 days. 3 days you've been pushing him on this. I managed. He didn't argue, didn't make a face or tell her what an incredible thing that was. He just said, yeah, I can see that, and kept working, and for some reason that mattered to her more than if he'd made a big production of it. It took him about 12 minutes to stabilize the wheel well enough to support Noah's weight without risk of full collapse. While he worked, Lily stayed close, not hovering, but present, never more than an arm's reach from her brother. Noah had his eyes open and was watching Ethan with the particular focused intensity of a 5-year-old who has learned to measure people carefully before deciding anything about them. He your dog? Noah asked, barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up. He is. His name's Ranger. You want to meet him? Noah looked at Lily. Maybe later, Lily said. Noah accepted this without complaint. He had learned, like his sister, that later from Lily was not a dismissal. It was a promise she actually kept. Getting Noah into the truck was a small logistical problem. The cab was high off the ground, and the boy's legs didn't work the way they were supposed to. The result of a condition Lily had explained to exactly 0 people in the past several months, because explaining it meant forms and assessments and the clinical vocabulary of a system that hadn't actually helped them yet. Ethan solved it practically. He lifted Noah with the same matter-of-fact care he would have used moving a piece of equipment that required delicate handling. No fanfare. No commentary about how light he was, which Lily hated because it was always weighted with subtext. He just moved the boy safely into the passenger seat, reclined it slightly, and tucked a fleece blanket gray, military issue, worn soft around him. Noah looked at the interior of the truck with wide eyes. Smells like dog, he said. It does, Ethan agreed. Sorry about that. I like it, Noah said. Lily climbed in on the other side, pulling the door shut behind her. The heat was immediate and overwhelming, not excessive, just warm. The kind of warm that makes you realize how cold you've actually been. She felt something in her shoulders loosen that she hadn't been aware was locked. Ranger, from the back seat, pushed his nose gently between the seats and rested it on Noah's armrest. Noah went very still. Then slowly he reached out one small hand and placed it on the dog's muzzle. Ranger didn't move, just breathed, his eyes, dark and calm, stayed on the boy. He won't bite, Noah whispered. He'll bite if I tell him to, Ethan said. I'm not telling him to. Has he ever bitten anyone? Yes. Did they deserve it? A beat every time. Noah absorbed this. Then his small fingers moved slightly on Ranger's muzzle, a tentative petting motion, and the dog let out a low breath that was as close to contentment as a working K9 permitted itself. Lily watched all of this and said nothing. She had her backpack on her lap. She hadn't let it leave her hands since they'd gotten in. The straps were wet. Everything was wet. She was starting to feel the kind of warmth that precedes the realization of how exhausted you are, which was dangerous because she couldn't afford to be exhausted. Not yet. There's a diner about 6 miles up the road, Ethan said. He hadn't started the truck yet. He was giving her time. Still open at this hour. I passed it on the way down. Hot food, dry. No one's going to bother you. And then what? Lily asked. Then you eat. Noah eats. We figure out the rest after. There's no we, she said, not unkind, just precise. Ethan nodded slowly. Fair enough. He eats, and you can decide what comes next after that. I won't push anything. She looked at him sideways. People always push. I know, he said. I've worked with people who push. I've also learned that you can't actually help anyone who doesn't want it. It just turns into a different kind of problem. He started the engine. So I'm not pushing, I'm just here. Tonight. Lily held her backpack tighter. Okay, she said finally. The diner. The diner was called Marvella's, and it was the kind of place that had been there since, before the interstate made the two-lane highway irrelevant, a low building with a neon sign missing two letters, vinyl booths cracked at the seams, a pie display rotating slowly beside the register with three kinds of pie, and one of them was clearly yesterday's. The waitress who seated them was a heavy-set woman with a name tag that said Donna, and the particular tired warmth of someone who had seen enough of life to know that the family coming in out of the rain at this hour wasn't her business unless they made it her business. She brought menus, took in Lily's soaked hair and Noah's blanket and Ethan's expression, and said, "Coffee's fresh. Kids want cocoa." Noah looked at Lily. "Yes, please," Lily said. Donna disappeared without ceremony, and Ethan liked her immediately. He'd left Ranger in the truck with the window cracked, and the engine running the dog could handle it, and he knew better than to push the restaurant's goodwill. He folded his hands on the table and watched the two kids look at the menus with the careful attention of people who are used to calculating. "Get whatever you want," he said. "We don't take charity," Lily said without looking up. "It's not charity. It's dinner. You don't owe me anything for it. That's what charity is." He thought about arguing, decided against it. "Get whatever you want," he said again. "Call it what you like." What Lily ordered was modest soup and a grilled cheese, small orange juice. What Noah ordered, once Lily quietly told him he could, was pancake, which the menu offered as an all-day breakfast option with extra butter and the strawberry topping on the side because he wasn't sure if he'd like it. The specificity of it caught in Ethan's throat in a way he hadn't been prepared for a 5-year-old making careful decisions about strawberry topping, like it was the most important question of the evening. He ordered black coffee and eggs he didn't particularly want. While they waited, Ethan turned his cup in his hands and said, "You don't have to tell me anything." Lily looked at him over the menu she hadn't put down. "But if you want to," he said, "I'm not going to repeat it to anyone without your permission. That's a commitment I'm making to you, not a thing I'm saying because it sounds good." "How do I know that you don't?" he said. "Not yet." She set the menu down, aligned it carefully with the edge of the table. "We've been moving around for about 4 months," she said, "since our situation changed." Since our situation changed, he filed that away, the language of someone who had learned to describe catastrophe in neutral terms. "And before that, we had a place, we had people." She paused. "Things don't always stay the way they are." "No," Ethan said. "They don't." Noah was watching the pie display rotate. He didn't appear to be listening, but Ethan had enough experience with quiet children to know that the ones who appear not to be listening are almost always listening the hardest. "The wheelchair," Ethan said carefully. "Does he need it full-time?" "His legs work sometimes," Lily said, "short distances, when he's not tired. But when he gets cold, it gets harder, and he falls more." So she shrugged in a way that wasn't casual at all. "The chair. Has he seen a doctor lately?" "We've seen a lot of doctors," she said flatly, "in a lot of different places. He has a name for it. It's in the file." "What file?" She looked at him for a moment. Then she reached into her backpack and produced a Ziploc bag, the heavy-duty the kind you use when you need something to stay dry, sealed tight, with a bundle of folded papers inside. She set it on the table, but didn't push it toward him. "Everything's in there," she said. "His medical records, our IDs, some other papers." A pause. "I've been keeping it dry since before I can remember." Ethan stared at the Ziploc bag. He'd done 3 combat deployments and 6 months of counter-terrorism work in places with names he wasn't permitted to say at a dinner table. He'd seen preparation under pressure. He'd seen people make hard decisions in impossible conditions and execute them with a clarity that most people could only access when everything else had been stripped away. He had not expected to see it in a 10-year-old at a diner booth in the middle of the night. "Lily," he said. She met his eyes. "I'm going to ask you one question," he said, "and then I'm going to stop. Okay?" She waited. "Is there anyone looking for you? Anyone who wants to find you family, someone from before who just doesn't know where to look?" The silence that followed was long enough that Donna reappeared with the cocoa, and Noah immediately wrapped both hands around the mug and inhaled the steam with his eyes closed. The unself-conscious pleasure of a 5-year-old who has been very cold for a very long time. "I don't know," Lily said finally. "Quiet." I used to think so. I'm not sure anymore. Ethan nodded. He didn't push. He'd promised, and he kept promises that mattered. The food came. Noah ate the pancakes with methodical focus, cutting them into small squares the way someone had once taught him, though he didn't say who. Lily ate her soup without hurrying, watching the room, watching the door, watching Ethan the way she had been watching him, since the moment he stepped out of the truck, continuously calibrating, measuring, refusing to commit to any final assessment. He respected it. He understood it. Around 1 in the morning, Noah finished his cocoa, set the mug down neatly, and fell asleep, sitting up his head, tilting slowly sideways until it came to rest on Lily's shoulder. She stopped eating. Didn't move. Just let him sleep there, one hand going up automatically to hold him steady. He does that, she said softly. Yeah, Ethan said. They sat in the quiet of the diner, the rotating pie display, the low murmur of the radio in the kitchen, the rain still tapping on the windows. What happened to you? Lily asked, not rudely, genuinely. What do you mean? You said retired 14 months ago. You were driving alone on an empty road at midnight in the rain. Your dog was the one who made you stop. She watched him. People who are okay don't usually do that. Ethan looked at his coffee cup. No, he said. I guess they don't. So what happened? He was quiet for a moment. In his professional life, in the years when his professional life had been everything, he would have answered that question. With the standard package, the operational summary, the sanitized version, the version that made sense to civilians and didn't require follow-up questions about things he couldn't discuss. But he was sitting across from a 10-year-old who had kept her brother's medical records in a waterproof bag for God knows how long, who had wrapped her jacket around a child in a broken wheelchair in the rain, who had asked him a direct question and deserved something better than the sanitized version. I lost people, he said, members of my team, and I came home and the world was just still going, like nothing happened, and I couldn't figure out how to be in it anymore. He turned the cup. So I drive. Lily was quiet. Then does it help? Some nights more than others. She looked down at her brother's sleeping face on her shoulder. What? Noah helps me, she said. When I don't know what to do, I just think about what he needs. And then I know what to do. Ethan looked at her. You got somewhere to go tonight? He asked. She shook her head. Then you're staying somewhere dry, he said. That's not a push. That's just logistics, she almost argued. He could see it. Then she looked at Noah, and the argument went somewhere else. Okay, she said, logistics. He found them a motel the decent kind, not expensive but clean, run by a couple from somewhere overseas who didn't ask questions and had a ground floor room with a ramp access because Ethan asked specifically for it. He paid for 2 nights, got 2 key cards, handed both to Lily. Both of them are yours, he said. I've got a room down the hall. You can lock your door, and I won't knock unless you knock first. She took the key cards, looked at them. Why are you doing this? She asked. It was the question he'd been waiting for, and he didn't have a clean answer for it. He thought about the things he could say, the easy ones, the ones that made him sound like a better person than he probably was. He thought about what was actually true. I drove past people my whole career, he said. Places where there were kids who needed someone to stop, and I had a mission objective, and I kept moving. I was good at keeping moving. He looked at her. Tonight, Ranger made me stop. I figure that's worth paying attention to. Lily studied him for a long moment. You should sleep, she said finally. You too. I don't really sleep, she said. Matter of fact. Like stating a weather condition. He knew that feeling exactly. Me neither, he said. But try anyway, she nodded once. Then she maneuvered Noah's wheelchair, newly stabilized, holding steady through the motel room door, and the door closed behind them, and the lock clicked. Ethan stood in the corridor for a moment. In his left jacket pocket, his phone had 3 missed calls from a number he recognized and wasn't ready to deal with. In his right pocket, his hand found the edge of his room, key worn smooth from 100 identical motel rooms on 100 identical in-between nights. He went to his room, sat on the edge of the bed. Ranger settled on the floor beside him, heavy and warm, and Ethan put his hand on the dog's back without thinking about it. Outside, the rain was starting to ease. Tomorrow was a thing he'd deal with when it got here. He was up at 530, which was when his body woke him regardless of intention. He made bad motel coffee and sat with it by the window, watching the parking lot turn gray and then pale gold as the sun came up without much drama behind a low ceiling of cloud. 612. There was a knock at his door. He opened it. Lily was standing in the corridor, still in yesterday's clothes, her hair damp from what looked like a recent shower. She was holding the Ziploc bag. "Noah's still asleep," she said. "I need to talk to you about something in the documents." He stepped back to let her in. She sat at the small desk by the window and unzipped the bag with practiced efficiency, the same kind of practiced efficiency he'd seen the night before. The waterproof bag, the organized papers, and laid 3 documents side by side on the desk surface. "These," she said. He leaned over to look. 2 were forms he recognized, the standard kind from welfare agencies, the kind that moved from county to county as families moved, each one a layer of bureaucracy that had failed to resolve itself into actual help. The third was a letter. He picked it up, read it, set it back down. "When did you get this?" he asked. "Before we left the last place," she said. "I didn't understand all of it, but I knew it was important. I kept it because she stopped. I don't know. It felt like proof. Someone was looking, or had been." Ethan read the letter again. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a legal notice. It was, stripped down to its core, communication from a family services coordinator in a different county, a coordinator who had been trying to trace a set of siblings whose case had fallen through 3 separate administrative gaps over the course of 2 years. The letter was 7 months old. The name and contact number at the bottom were for a woman named Sandra Holt. "Have you tried calling this number?" he asked. "I don't have a phone," Lily said simply. Of course she didn't. He picked up his phone, looked at the 3 missed calls from last night, set them aside. "Let me make some calls today," he said. "What kind of calls?" "The kind where I figure out who Sandra Holt is and whether that number still works," he said. "And then I'll tell you what I find before I do anything else with it. Nothing happens without you knowing first." Lily looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. She reached over and refolded the letter, exactly along its original crease lines, replaced it in the Ziploc bag, sealed it, tucked it under her arm. Ethan picked up his coffee, looked out the window. The sky was doing something complicated, still gray, but the kind of gray that comes before it breaks. Like it hadn't decided yet. "He likes Ranger," Lily said out of nowhere. "I noticed. He doesn't usually like dogs. He's nervous around them." Ethan looked at her. "What's different about Ranger?" she asked. He considered it. "Ranger's not trying to be liked," he said finally. "He's just there." Noah figured that out faster than most people do. Lily was quiet. Then, "That's what I thought." She stood, moved toward the door with the same watchful economy she'd moved with since the moment he first saw her, the posture of someone whose survival instincts had been on since long before they should have needed to be. She opened the door, stopped. Without turning around, she said, "Thank you for not making it weird." "It's not weird," he said. "Most people make it weird," she said. The door closed. He was on the phone by 700. First 2 calls were old contacts, people from the network of veterans organizations he'd nominally been part of since separating from the Navy. People who knew how to move through systems that civilians found impenetrable. The third call was to a direct line he'd been given by a social worker who'd helped one of his teammates' families after a deployment went wrong. A woman named Kay Merritt, who answered on the second ring and asked no unnecessary questions when he's described the situation in broad strokes. "Sandra Holt," Kay repeated. "Family services in Callaway County." "Yeah, I know of her. She's good, not a box checker. Give me an hour." He gave her an hour. In that hour, he walked to a convenience store 3 blocks away and bought 2 apple juices, a box of cereal bars, and a small bag of dog treats. He walked back, knocked on Lily's door 3 times, measured the way you knock when you want someone to know exactly who it is. 30 seconds. Then the lock. Noah was sitting up in the wheelchair beside the bed. Ranger, who had followed Ethan without being invited and been admitted without ceremony, lying on the floor beside him. The boy had his hand resting on the dog's back, with the careful possessiveness of someone who has just decided something important. "You said his name was Ranger," Noah said by way of greeting. "It is," Ethan said. "That's a good name for him," Noah said. "He looks like a ranger." Ethan set the food on the small table. How'd you sleep? Lily made me, Noah said. She said I had to sleep 8 hours or my immune system would break. He paused. I don't know what that is, but I slept. From the bathroom, the sound of running water stopped. A moment later, Lily appeared in the doorway, saw Ethan, saw the food, saw Ranger flat on the floor at Noah's feet. Something in her face did the small involuntary calculation, the one she probably did 60 times a day, cost-benefit, threat level, likelihood of the thing in front of her being what it appeared to be. Came out and sat on the edge of the bed. Any news? She asked. Soon, he said. She nodded, reached past him for one of the cereal bars without asking, which struck him as the most relaxed she'd been since the moment he'd found her. Small things. Small shifts. Kay called back at 843. He stepped into the corridor to take it. What Kay told him took 4 minutes and included 3 items of information that mattered and several that didn't. He listened, asked 2 clarifying questions, thanked her, ended the call. He stood in the corridor for a moment, looking at the carpet. Then he went back in, sat down across from Lily at the small table, and told her everything. Kay had said all of it, exactly as it had been told to him, without softening or selecting or making decisions on her behalf about what she was ready to hear, 'cause he had told her he would. She listened without speaking. Her hands were on the table, flat. Noah was oblivious, deeply engaged in the logistical project of feeding Ranger a cereal bar piece by piece, the dog accepting each offering with the dignity of a creature that has not yet decided whether it approves of cereal but is willing to continue the investigation. When Ethan finished, Lily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You said she's good." This Sandra Holt. That's what Kay said. And Kay doesn't say that about people she doesn't mean it about. Another long silence. If we call her, Lily said slowly, what happens? I don't know for certain, he said. I can tell you what's most likely, but I don't know. Would they separate us? He held her gaze. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they don't. Can't promise that. I can promise that it goes at your pace, and that you know every step before it happens, and that I stay involved until you tell me to stop. That I can promise. Lily looked at the table. Noah made a small sound of triumph as Ranger accepted a particularly large piece of cereal bar. His wheel is going to break again by Thursday, Lily said finally. I know, we need a real fix. I know that too. She looked up. Okay, she said. For the 3rd time since he'd found her on that wet gravel shoulder on a road that had no particular reason to matter. Each time it cost her something. Each time she paid it. He picked up his phone. That was the moment the motel room door, which had been slightly ajar, the chain not engaged, swung open. A man Ethan had never seen before filled the doorway. He was wearing a county services lanyard around his neck and holding a clipboard, and beside him was a woman in a gray blazer who was already reaching for her phone, and behind them both was a uniformed police officer who was not doing anything threatening, but whose presence said everything it needed to say. And the man with the clipboard looked at Lily and Noah and said, in the flat practiced tone of someone reading from a script they'd used many times before, Lily Carter and Noah Carter. I'm with Harlan County Child Protective Services. We've received a report. I need you to come with us. Lily went completely still. Her eyes found Ethan's. And in them, beneath the fear that had just arrived like a physical blow, beneath the calculation already starting up, the threat assessment, the odds was a single question she didn't have to say out loud. Did you do this? Ethan didn't move. That was the thing that mattered in the next 3 seconds, while the room recalibrated around the presence of 3 strangers in the doorway. In his experience, the wrong movement in the first 3 seconds of an unexpected situation was the thing that turned something manageable into something else entirely. So he didn't move. He kept his hands visible, his weight even, his face neutral in the way that took years to learn and cost more than he'd ever adequately explained to anyone. Ranger, on the floor beside Noah's wheelchair, had gone completely still, not aggressive, not cowering, just still, the particular stillness of a trained animal that has read the room and is waiting for instruction. Sir, the man with the clipboard directed this at Ethan in a tone that was professionally neutral, but carried a specific undertone, the undertone of a person who has decided in advance who the problem is. I need to ask you to step away from the children. I'm sitting at a table, Ethan said. I haven't moved. Step away from the children, please. The woman in the gray blazer was still on her phone, half turned away, speaking in a low voice that Ethan couldn't make out. The uniformed officer, young, maybe 25, kind of tense that came from not having enough experience to know which situations actually required tension, had his thumbs in his belt and was doing the thing where you try to look relaxed and don't quite pull it off. Lily had not moved. She was sitting on the edge of the bed exactly as she'd been sitting when the door opened, and her hands were still flat on her thighs, and she was looking at Ethan with that question still alive. In her eyes, the one she hadn't said out loud, the one that was going to matter more than anything the man with the clipboard said next. Ethan held her gaze. I didn't make that call, he said. To her, not to the room. To her specifically. She heard it. He could see that she heard it. Whether she believed it was a different calculation, and he understood that she needed time to run it, so he gave her the seconds it required and didn't push. The man with the clipboard checked something on his papers. Walker, Ethan Walker, is that correct? Yes, mister. Walker, I'm Dennis Farrell, Harlan County CPS. We received an anonymous report last night regarding 2 minor children in the company of an unknown adult male at this location. I need to speak with Lily and Noah Carter separately, and I need you to. I heard you the first time, Ethan said. He stood up slowly and took 2 steps back from the table, putting distance between himself and the children in a way that was cooperative, without being capitulatory. I'll step outside. But I want it on record, whatever record you're keeping, that these children came with me voluntarily, that I have not harmed them, and that I was in the process of making contact with Sandra Holt at Callaway County Family Services regarding an existing open case file. Something changed in Farrell's expression. Small but real. Sandra Holt, he repeated. That's correct. I have the contact number, the case reference number from the letter these children have been carrying, and a third-party contact who can verify the call I made this morning. Her name is Kay Merritt. She works with the Clearwater Veterans Family Support Network. He pulled his phone from his pocket, held it up so Farrell could see the recent call log without having to hand it over. I'm not going to make your job harder, but I need you to understand that these kids are not a blank slate case. There is prior documentation, and it matters. Farrell looked at the phone, looked at Lily, looked back at his clipboard. The woman in the gray blazer lowered her phone, came forward. I'm Cynthia Moore. She said, quieter than Farrell, with less practiced authority and more actual attention. I'm the case coordinator. Mr. Walker, I appreciate you sharing that information. It will be taken into account. She turned to Lily. Lily, sweetheart. Nobody's here to don't call me sweetheart, Lily said. Moore stopped. Lily's voice had been perfectly level, not angry. Just Moore said, Lily. Nobody's here to scare you. We just need to talk. You're here with a police officer, Lily said. That's not talking. That's something else. The young officer shifted his weight. Ethan, from his position near the window, watched Lily manage the room and felt something complicated move through him, something that was partly admiration and partly the specific grief of watching a 10-year-old operate with competencies that no 10-year-old should need. Noah was the only person in the room who hadn't fully registered the significance of the moment. He was looking at the officer's badge with the focused interest of a 5-year-old encountering something shiny and official. Ranger, sensing the shift in Noah's attention, had also oriented slightly toward the officer, not threatening, just tracking. Noah, Lily said quietly. He looked at her. It's okay, she said. Just sit still for a minute. He nodded and went back to looking at the badge. They let Ethan stay in the room. It wasn't an immediate concession. It took 12 minutes of quiet, firm back and forth between Ethan and Farrell, during which Cynthia Moore made 2 phone calls, and the young officer found himself with nothing useful to do and retreated slightly into the corridor. The concession came when Moore confirmed, from her end, that Sandra Holt's case reference number matched the documents in Lily's Ziploc bag, which Lily had produced without being asked when Moore explained what it would mean if the documentation checked out. You've been carrying that bag for how long? Moore asked, looking at the papers. Since before the last place, Lily said. Can you tell me what the last place was? A shelter in Denton County. We left because they said they couldn't keep us together. Moore wrote something down. Her handwriting was small and fast. And before that, a place in Milford. Before that, a woman named Patricia who let us stay for 3 weeks. Before that, Lily stopped. It goes back a while. That's okay, Moore said. We don't have to cover everything right now. Farrell was doing something on his own phone near the door. The young officer had fully retreated to the corridor, which Ethan noted as a quiet improvement in the room's atmosphere. He stayed near the window, out of the way, present. He'd worked alongside people in difficult situations who had a genius for making themselves part of the furniture being in a room without occupying it, available without being intrusive. It was a skill with genuine tactical applications, and it was also just a decent human quality, and he wasn't always sure which category his version of it fell into. Lily answered Moore's questions in the same way she'd answered his precise, selective, giving what was necessary and holding back what wasn't. But there were differences. With him in the diner, in the quiet of the early morning, she'd occasionally let something slip through a real sentence, an unguarded moment, the way she'd said, "Noah helps me." With Moore, she was doing the other version, cooperative surface, everything underneath locked down. He understood why. He didn't like it, but he understood it. Lily, Moore said, after about 20 minutes of the back and forth, I want to be honest with you about where things stand. Lily waited. The report we received last night described a minor female and a minor with a disability in the company of an unknown adult male at this motel. We're required to respond to that. She paused. Now, having seen the documentation you have, having confirmed the case file with Callaway County, and having spoken with Mr. Walker, I have a significantly different picture of the situation than the report suggested. Who made the report? Lily asked. Anonymous. Doesn't that seem convenient? Moore hesitated. What do you mean? Someone knew we were here. We didn't tell anyone we were here. Lily looked at her hands. That's not nothing. Farrell looked up from his phone. Ethan kept his face neutral but filed the observation away. She wasn't wrong. The motel had been a same-night decision. Cash payment, no names beyond the room registration. Anonymous report. Someone had seen them arrive, made a call, and framed it in the most alarming possible terms: unknown adult male, children with disability. Not inaccurate, technically. Architecturally designed to trigger mandatory response. He thought about who might have been watching the parking lot at 11 at night. He thought about it and set it aside for later. Do you have any reason, Ethan said from the window, to believe this report was made by someone other than a concerned bystander? Farrell looked at him with the expression of a man who does not enjoy having his investigation reframed. We investigate all reports equally, Mr. Walker. That's not what I asked. A beat. At this time, Farrell said carefully, we have no information suggesting the report was made in bad faith. But you're not ruling it out, Ethan said. The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough to mean something. They didn't take the children. It wasn't a clean victory, it didn't feel like one, and Ethan had been around enough bureaucratic machinery to know that not taking the children today was not the same as a resolved situation. What it was, in practical terms, was a conditional arrangement. Cynthia Moore would initiate direct contact with Sandra Holt by end of business that day. The case file would be formally transferred to Harlan County with the Callaway documentation attached, and Ethan would be registered as a temporary point of contact pending a more formal assessment of the children's situation. You're not a licensed foster carer, Farrell said, making this sound like an accusation. No, Ethan said. I'm aware of that. You can't simply... I'm not simply anything, Ethan said. I found 2 kids on the side of a road in the rain, and I made sure they had food and shelter and dry clothes. I've made documented contact with the existing case system. I haven't made any claims of custody or guardianship. What would you have preferred I do drive past? Farrell had no answer for that. Moore intervened before the silence could calcify into something worse. Mr. Walker, I think what Dennis is trying to establish is a clear framework going forward. Nobody's suggesting you've done anything wrong. We just need to ensure the children are in a formally documented, safe situation while the case is being processed. That's what I'm trying to help you establish. Ethan said. Then let's make sure we're working in the same direction, Moore said. It was professionally diplomatic. He respected it even while recognizing it as what it was. They left at 946. Farrell first, then the officer, then Moore, who paused at the door and said to Lily quietly, "I'll be in contact today. Directly with you, not just Mr. Walker. Is that okay?" Lily looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," she said. When the door closed, Noah said, "Is that over?" "For now," Lily said. The badge man was nervous, Noah said. He kept touching his belt. "Yeah," Ethan said. "He did." Noah considered this. Ranger wasn't scared of him, though. "No," Ethan agreed. Ranger wasn't. "Good," Noah said, with the finality of someone who has just resolved an important question. Lily looked at Ethan. He waited. "I believe you," she said. About the call. About him not being the one who'd made the report. She hadn't said, "I believe you," she'd said it, with the slight shift in her posture and the way her shoulders released a fraction, the way her hands moved off her thighs, and she reached for the second cereal bar she hadn't touched earlier. He understood. "I need to make a few more calls," he said. "And I need to figure out something." "What?" "The report. Who made it and why?" She looked at him. "You think it matters?" "Someone knew exactly where you were and framed it in the worst possible terms. In my experience, that's not random." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There was a man at the convenience store. When you went this morning." Ethan went still. "What man?" "Older. Maybe 60. Gray jacket. He was looking at us through the window when we were at the vending machine." She paused. "He had a phone out. I noticed, but I didn't say anything, because I thought I was seeing problems that weren't there." "You're not," Ethan said. "I know," she said. "I don't usually." He turned this over. "Someone in a gray jacket with a phone, outside a convenience store at 700. It could be nothing. It was also not nothing. Has anyone been following you?" he asked. "Before last night. Anyone you saw more than once?" "I don't know," Lily said. "Then maybe." She looked at the Ziploc bag on the bed. "There were papers in there I didn't show her. The ones I don't understand. Can I see them?" She looked at him for a moment, the full spectrum assessment, the same one she'd run on him every time he'd asked for something. Then she reached into the bag and produced 3 additional pages, folded separately from the others. He took them. The first 2 were form letters, the standard kind, institution to institution correspondence, the vocabulary of administrative systems passing a case from one set of hands to another. He read them quickly and set them aside. The third was not a form letter. It was handwritten. A single page, ink slightly faded, the handwriting of someone in a hurry. No letterhead. No signature, or rather, there had been a signature, but it had been torn away, carefully, leaving a straight, clean edge at the bottom of the page. The content was 7 lines. He read it twice. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "A woman gave it to Noah," Lily said. "Before we left Milford. She came to the back door of the shelter, and she had it folded up, and she gave it to Noah because he was outsides. Not me. She told him to give it to his sister and to make sure nobody saw." A pause. "He didn't tell me until 2 days later because he forgot." Ethan looked at the page. The 7 lines were not explicit. They were not the kind of thing that, read in isolation by someone who didn't know the context, would mean much at all. But read in the context of the rest of the documents, the case file, the administrative letters, the specific gaps and omissions in the official record, they meant something very specific. Someone had been watching these children for a reason that had nothing to do with their welfare. He set the page down on the desk. "Lily," he said. She was watching him. She'd been watching his face while he read, reading him the way she read everything. And he knew she'd caught the thing that had shifted in his expression because she was already 2 steps into her own assessment of it. "It's bad, isn't it?" she said, not a question. "It's complicated," he said carefully. "That's what people say when it's bad, and they don't want to scare you." He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "It's not good." She breathed out slowly through her nose. Looked at Noah, who was attempting to show Ranger something in a small, tattered notebook. The notebook Ethan had spotted in the wheelchair's seat pocket the night before, the one Lily had mentioned without detail. The boy was pointing at a drawing of what appeared to be a house with a very large yard and a dog that bore some resemblance to Ranger in the way that 5-year-old drawings resemble anything specific. He draws houses, Lily said, following his gaze. He's been drawing that same house for about a year. Different versions, but always the same house. It's a good house, Ethan said. It doesn't exist, she said. Not yet. She looked at him. Something moved in her face, brief, complicated, the expression of a person trying very hard not to want something too much. She looked away first. Ethan spent the next 3 hours on the phone. He did it from the motel room, because leaving felt wrong, and he'd told Lily he was staying, and that commitment meant something. He sat in the chair by the window with his coffee going cold, and his notepad filling up with the shorthand he'd developed over years of needing to record information fast and retrieve it faster, a personal cipher that mixed standard military. Notation with abbreviations he'd invented and never taught anyone. First call was Kay again. "I need you to look up something for me," he said, "and I need you to be careful about how you look it up." Kay, to her credit, did not ask him to explain careful. She'd known him long enough to understand that when he used that word specifically, it was load-bearing. "Give me the name," she said. He read her the name from the administrative letter in the case file, the originating caseworker from 2 years prior, the one whose name appeared on the earliest document in Lily's collection and then disappeared from all subsequent paperwork without explanation. "I'll see what I can find," Kay said. "Give me 2 hours." The second call was to a former teammate, a man named Briggs, who had separated from the team 6 years before Ethan had, and was now doing private security work in the kind of vague, broad-spectrum way that meant he had access to information. Networks that didn't appear in any organizational chart. Ethan trusted Briggs with specific things and not with others, and this was a specific thing. Harlan County, Briggs said, when Ethan had summarized the situation. Specific. "What do you know about it?" "Not much directly. But I know someone who's been watching a particular family services subcontracting situation in that general area for about 8 months. Allegedly."
Off the record.
"Allegedly off the record," Ethan said. "You know how it is. Can you make a call?" "I can make a text," Briggs said. "Lower profile. Give me today." The third call was to the motel office, to extend the room reservation by another night. The woman at the desk, not the overnight person, someone new, charged him without comment. He set the phone down and looked out the window at the parking lot, which was empty in the way parking lots at mid-morning motels are empty. A few cars, sun heating the asphalt, nobody moving. The gray van that had been parked diagonally across the lot when they arrived the night before was still there. He'd noticed it when they pulled in. He noticed it now. It was probably nothing. He wrote down the plate number anyway. Lily spent the morning doing the things she did when she was trying not to think, the quiet, methodical maintenance tasks that had become her default mode in the months of moving. She hand-washed their remaining clean clothes in the bathroom sink and hung them over the towel rail and the shower rod. She reorganized the contents of the backpack, which she did every few days by habit, inventorying what they had and what they needed. She sharpened a pencil she'd been carrying since Milford, using the small sharpener clipped to the inside of the bag's front pocket, and she used it to make a careful, precise list in the back of her own notebook, smaller than Noah's, black cover, ruled pages of everything that had happened since the previous night, in chronological order, with names and details. She'd been keeping the log since they left the last stable place. Nobody had ever asked to see it. She wasn't sure what she'd say if they did. Ethan, from his seat by the window, watched her work without commenting on it. That was something she had noticed about him, he observed without narrating. Most adults, when they noticed a child doing something that surprised them, felt compelled to remark on it. "What are you writing? That's so organized. You're so responsible." The remarks weren't malicious. They were just a way of managing their own discomfort with something they hadn't expected. Ethan just watched and then went back to his phone. It was more respectful than most of what she'd received from adults who considered themselves helpful. Around noon, he ordered food to the room from a place that delivered. She'd seen the menu in the desk drawer, and he'd slid it toward her without comment and let her look at it first, which she also noticed. Noah wanted a grilled cheese with tomato soup, the same as the night before, which she recognized as a good sign. He was eating. He wanted specific things, He was not in the gray, non-responsive state that sometimes settled over him when he was too stressed or too cold for too long. While they ate, Ethan got a text that made him set his sandwich down and read it twice. She watched him. "What?" she said. He looked at her. Then at Noah. Noah was dipping his grilled cheese into the soup with great attention to dunking depth. He was not going to die from hearing whatever it was, and Lily was tired of being protected from information she was going to need anyway. "Tell me," she said. "The caseworker," Ethan said. "The name on your earliest document. A woman named Ellen Stroud. She filed the initial case report on you and Noah 2 years ago and then disappeared from the paperwork." "I remember her," Lily said. "She came twice. She resigned from family services 8 months ago," Ethan said. "According to my contact, she filed a formal internal complaint before she resigned. About a case," he paused. "The complaint was dismissed and then sealed." The room was quiet, except for the specific sound of Noah's soup dunking. "It was about us," Lily said. Not a question. "I don't know that for certain, but the timing, it was about us," Lily said again. Level. Certain the way 10-year-olds are not supposed to be certain about things like this. Ethan said probably. She set her half-eaten lunch on the desk, looked at the wall. There was a crack in the plaster, diagonal, from the upper corner of the window frame down toward the baseboard. Someone had painted over it without fixing it, which meant it was going to keep moving. It was the kind of thing you noticed when you spent a lot of time in rooms you didn't belong in. "Someone sealed it," she said. "Yes. Someone with enough authority to seal it." "Yes. And that same someone or someone working with them made the call last night to bring CPS here." Ethan looked at her. "Because we're in Harlan County now," she said, "which is where the complaint was filed and sealed. And we weren't supposed to be here. We were just—" She stopped, started again. "We were just trying to get further north. We only stopped because Noah's wheel broke. Convergence of it, the randomness of a broken wheelchair wheel, the road they'd been on, the direction they'd been heading. Ranger waking up was the kind of thing Ethan did not have a clean framework for, and he was not going to give it a framework in front of this child. He was going to stay in the practical. "Yes," he said. "That's what I'm putting together." "So what does that mean?" she asked. "For right now. It means," he said, "that I need to be more careful about who I contact and how. And it means that we need to think about whether staying in Harlan County is the right move. Moore said she'd call today. She will. And I think Moore is okay. I think she's doing her job cleanly. But Farrell," he considered how to say it. "Farrell got here very fast for an anonymous report." Lily was quiet. Noah finished his grilled cheese, pushed the plate aside, and looked at Ranger, who was lying at full length on the floor, with his nose pointed at the heating vent. "Ranger's warm," Noah announced. "He likes the heat," Ethan said. "Me too," Noah said. He looked at Lily. "Are we going somewhere again?" Lily looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Lily. The question hanging in the air between them wasn't one he could answer for her. It was her call. It had always been her call, from the moment she'd stepped between a stranger and her brother's wheelchair on a wet gravel shoulder in the dark. He had information she needed. He had logistics he could provide. He did not have the right to make this decision. "Maybe," Lily told Noah. "We'll see." Noah accepted this with the equanimity of a child who has learned that maybe we'll see is a kind of honesty. "Can Ranger come?" he asked. Ethan said, "Ranger goes where I go." Noah nodded with satisfaction. "Okay," he said. Then okay. Moore called at 2:17 in the afternoon. She reached Ethan first. He'd given her his number in the morning, and he put her on speaker with Lily present because he'd said nothing happens without you knowing first, and he meant it. "I've spoken with Sandra Holt," Moore said. She confirmed the case file. She was relieved to hear they'd been found. She'd been trying to trace this case for 8 months. 8 months, Lily said. A brief pause on Moore's end. "Yes, Lily, hi. I know you're there. I'm here," Lily said. "Sandra wants to speak with you directly. She asked me to tell you that. She said, and I'm quoting her, that she's not interested in any outcome that puts you and Noah in separate placements. She said the whole point of what she's been trying to do is the opposite." Something moved in Lily's face, there and gone too fast to name. "Why is she still trying?" Lily asked. "It's been 2 years. Another pause. "She said to tell you that she made a promise to your first caseworker, Ellen Stroud. The name landed in the room differently than Ethan had expected, not with surprise, because they'd already been talking about Stroud, but with a particular weight. The weight of a thing becoming more real than a name on a document. Lily's hand was on the desk, flat, the way it got when she was processing something she wasn't ready to show. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll talk to her." "Tomorrow morning?" Moore offered. "In person would be better than phone, if that works. Where I can arrange somewhere neutral, not a CPS office." She paused. "Mr. Walker, would you be able to be present?" Sandra specifically asked if you'd be willing to be there. "Yes," Ethan said, without question. He looked at Lily when he said it. She was looking at the Ziploc bag on the bed, the handwritten letter with the torn signature, the 7 lines that meant something specific about why 2 children had been quietly, bureaucratically, systematically kept in motion for 2 years without resolution. She picked up the bag. "Held it, tell her," Lily said to Moore. "Tell her I have something she needs to see." "I will," Moore said. They ended the call. The gray van in the parking lot, Ethan noticed through the window, was gone. In its place was an older sedan he hadn't seen before, backed into the space, which meant whoever was driving it had made a decision about which direction they might need to leave quickly. He wrote down that plate number, too. And he said nothing to Lily about either one, because there was a line between the information she needed for her own safety and the information that would cost her another night of sleep she couldn't afford to lose, and he was still figuring out where that line was. What he said instead was, "You should both get some rest." Lily looked at him with the expression of someone who knows they're being managed and is choosing to allow it because they're tired enough. "You're not going to sleep," she said. "No," he said. "You're going to sit by the window all night, probably." She looked at the window, at the parking lot, at the new sedan backed into the gray van's spot. She hadn't missed it either. Of course she hadn't. "I've got the second key card," she said. "I know. If something happens, nothing's going to happen tonight," he said. And then, because she deserved better than comfortable fiction, "I don't think anything's going to happen tonight. And I'm going to be here." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she stood, moved Noah's wheelchair closer to the bed, and helped her brother through the routine of getting ready for sleep, the same sequence. He could tell that she used every night, the same order, because routine was a kind of safety when geography kept changing. When Noah was settled, he looked across the room at Ethan and said, "You'll still be here in the morning?" Ethan said, "I'll be here." Noah nodded, closed his eyes. Lily turned off the lamp on her side of the bed. In the dark, she said, "The house in Noah's drawings. He started drawing it the week after we lost our real one." Ethan said nothing. "He's never been in a house like that," she said. "He made it up. But he draws it like he remembers it." The room was quiet. Outside, the parking lot held its light sodium orange, steady, the sedan exactly where it had backed in. Ethan sat in the chair by the window and did not sleep. The sedan was still there at 430. Ethan had been watching it for 6 hours, with the particular quality of attention that doesn't announce itself not staring, not tense, just aware, the way a person stays aware of a door they're not sure is latched. He'd moved twice during the night, once to let Ranger out briefly into the corridor and back, once to refill his water from the bathroom tap. Both times he'd returned to the chair and the window without turning on any lights. The sedan hadn't moved. The engine hadn't turned over. The interior had stayed dark. It could be a guest sleeping in their car. It happened. It could be a lot of things. At 437, the driver's door opened and a man got out. Ethan tracked him without moving. Medium height, heavier build, wearing a dark jacket with the collar up. The man walked to the motel office, not toward the rooms, and disappeared inside for about 4 minutes. When he came back out, he was carrying a coffee from the machine in the lobby. Ethan could see the small paper cup from here, and he stood beside his car and drank it and looked at the row of ground floor rooms. Looked at them for a while. Then he got back in his car. Ethan took out his phone and sent a text to Briggs, plate from last night. Need it traced before 800. He set the phone face down on the windowsill. Behind him, in the room's ambient darkness, he could hear Noah's breathing, the slow, even rhythm of a child who'd slept deeply and was still in it, which was good, which was what he'd hoped for. Lily's breathing was different, lighter, slightly irregular, the breathing of someone who was pretending to sleep and not quite managing it. He'd known since around midnight. He hadn't said anything because she needed rest more than she needed conversation, and sometimes the closest thing to rest is lying still in a warm room and letting your body decompress, even if your brain won't comply. 519, she said, very quietly. The car's still there. Yes, he said, a pause. How long have you been awake? I haven't slept, he said, Ethan. The first time she'd used his name without the slight hesitation before it. He noted this and didn't mark it. I'm fine, he said. Gone longer. That's not something to be proud of. No, he agreed. It's just a fact. She was quiet for a moment. He heard the rustle of the blanket as she sat up. What are you going to do about it? She said. Car. Wait until Briggs gets back to me on the plate. Then decide. And if it's what you think it is? Then we move before the 9 o'clock meeting with Moore. If we move, Moore might think we ran. I'll contact Moore before we go, he said. Make sure she knows it's not that. She might not believe you. She might not, he said. That's a risk. Lily was quiet. Outside, the sky was doing the thing it does at the very edge of dawn, not light yet, not dark anymore. A kind of deep gray blue that has no precise name and lasts about 11 minutes. Ethan had watched that particular color from a lot of different windows in a lot of different places. It had never meant the same thing twice. Try to sleep another hour, he said. I can't. I know. Try anyway. She didn't answer. But she also didn't get up, and the blanket moved again in a way that suggested she'd at least gone back to horizontal, which was as much as he was going to get. Briggs texted back at 703. Sedan registered to a holding company out of Milford. Company name is Crescent Property Management. Clean on paper. And here's the thing, CPM has a director who sits on the board of a nonprofit called Harlan Family Alliance. HFA receives county contract funding. Administered through, you're going to love this, the Harlan County Social Services Subcontracting Office. Ethan read the text twice. He read it the way he read intelligence reports, not for the facts in isolation, but for the shape they made together. Crescent Property Management, Harlan Family Alliance, County Contract Funding, the sealed complaint from Ellen Stroud, the case file that had been bouncing between counties for 2 years without resolving, the anonymous report that had brought CPS to their door within hours of arriving in Harlan County specifically. He typed back, name of the director. Briggs responded in under a minute, Gerald Marsh, former county commissioner. Not currently in office, but still very much in the county. Ethan set the phone down. He sat with it for 60 seconds, which was how long he gave himself to process new threat information before moving to response. 60 seconds to feel whatever he was going to feel about it, in this case a cold, specific anger, the kind that doesn't raise the heart rate, but sharpens everything, and then the 60 seconds were up, and he was past it, and into what do with this. He got up and knocked on the door between the desk and the bathroom, the sound that meant it was him, that Lily had established as the signal during the first night without either of them formally agreeing to it, the way practical arrangements sometimes crystallize without discussion. I'm up, she said. He opened the door. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, in yesterday's clothes, the Ziploc bag on her lap, her hair half-combed. Noah was still asleep. Ranger raised his head from the floor, assessed the situation, lowered it again. Ethan showed her the texts. She read them. Read them again. Harlan Family Alliance, she said. You know it? The shelter in Milford. The one that said they couldn't keep us together. She looked up. Their intake forms said in partnership with Harlan Family Alliance. Of course they did. So they knew where we were then too, she said. Yes. And they let us leave because we left on our own. But now we're back in the county. She set the Ziploc bag on the bed beside her, precisely the way she placed things when she was thinking hard. And someone told them. Someone told them, Ethan confirmed. The gray jacket man from the convenience store. Possibly. Or someone at the motel office. She looked at the door. The woman you paid last night. When you extended the reservation. Yes. The word landed flat. Not shock, she was past shock, just the recognition of another layer of the thing they were inside. How big is this? She asked. He answered her honestly, because she'd earned it. I don't know yet. Big enough that someone's been actively managing your case for 2 years instead of resolving it. Small enough that it's local county level, maybe 1 or 2 levels above. This isn't federal. That's supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be accurate, he said. She almost smiled. Didn't quite make it. We need to move, he said. Before that man in the car decides to do something other than watch. Where? Somewhere I pick. Not somewhere connected to anything you've told anyone. He paused. I need to call Moore first. And if she's... I don't think she is, he said. Moore's clean. I'm not certain, but I'm about 85%, and in the absence of better information, 85 is enough to work with. Lily absorbed this with the specific patience of someone who has learned that certainty is a luxury, and 85% is actually pretty good. Wake Noah gently, Ethan said. Don't make it feel like an emergency. He'll get scared if it feels like an emergency. I know how to wake my brother, she said. I know you do, he said. No apology in it, just acknowledgement. He stepped into the corridor and called Moore. Moore answered on the second ring and said, before he'd spoken more than 2 sentences, I know. He stopped. I got a call this morning, Moore said, from Sandra Holt. She did some checking last night on the Calloway case file, the history of it, how it kept getting transferred. She found a name in the administrative chain that she recognized. Gerald Marsh, Ethan said, a pause. How do you know that name? Moore asked. Different path, same destination, he said. What's Holt's read? She thinks these children have been being kept in a holding pattern for 2 years to prevent the case from ever reaching formal resolution. She thinks someone in the county funding structure has a direct interest in maintaining the subcontracting arrangement that processes placement cases, and that a formally resolved case, particularly one with documented irregularities, creates exposure. So as long as Lily and Noah stay in the system without resolution, the irregularities stay buried. That's what Sandra believes, Moore said. I'm inclined to agree with her. Ethan walked to the end of the corridor and stood with his back to the wall, so he had a sight line to both the exit and the parking lot through the fire door's narrow window. There's a man in a car in our parking lot, he said. Been there all night. Vehicle is registered to a company connected to Marsh. Silence on Moore's end. Then Mr. Walker, Ethan. Ethan, I need you to tell me where you're going to be at 9 o'clock. Depends on what you say next. She was quiet for a moment. He heard her breathing controlled, the breathing of someone making a decision. Sandra Holt is already in Harlan County, Moore said. She drove here last night when she couldn't reach me after hours. She has documentation independent of the official case file that she's been building for 8 months. She wants to meet with the children this morning. Not at a CPS office. Somewhere you pick. He thought about it. She comes alone, he said. She'll come with me, Moore said. You can verify we're not being followed. I will. I know, Moore said. I'd expect nothing less at this point. He gave her an address, a public library branch, 3 miles from the motel, a place with parking visible from the road, multiple exits, and no reason for anyone connected to Marsh's network to have an established presence. Moore confirmed the time, 9:30. He ended the call. Through the fire door window, the sedan in the parking lot had not moved. As Ethan watched, the driver's window lowered slightly. Someone was watching the motel room doors. He went back in. Getting out was a logistics problem, and Ethan solved it the way he solved logistics problems, quietly, sequentially, without explaining every step in advance to people who didn't need the full picture. What Lily needed to know was they were leaving, it needed to look routine, they were going out through the back. What Noah needed to know was that Ranger was coming. He'd arranged with the motel overnight staff a different person from the woman at the morning desk, a young man named Terrell, who'd seemed straightforward and who Ethan had tipped well the previous evening for access to the service exit that came out into the narrow utility lane behind the building. Terrell had not asked why, which was either professional discretion or self-preservation instinct. Either way, Ethan was grateful for it. They moved at 748. Lily carried both bags, hers and the supply bag Ethan had been carrying since the convenience store. She'd taken both without being asked, distributing the weight efficiently, leaving his hands free. He noticed this without commenting on it and moved ahead to check the corridor. Clear. The service exit was a fire door with a push bar. Ethan held it, and Lily navigated Noah's wheelchair through the gap with the practiced economy of someone who had maneuvered that chair through 100 tight spaces. Noah was quiet awake, taking in the back alley with the calm of a child who has learned that unusual exits are sometimes just part of the day. Ethan had moved the truck the previous afternoon to the lot of a diner 2 blocks away, on the instinct that keeping it at the motel left too clear a picture of their location and mobility. He'd called it stretching his legs. The 20-minute walk back was the kind of thing he'd have done without thinking on an operation. Here it cost him slightly more, because here there was a child in a wheelchair navigating uneven pavement, and his pace was constrained by what the terrain allowed, not by what the situation demanded. He stayed 3 steps ahead and kept his sight lines open. Lily pushed Noah without speaking, and the 3 of them moved through the back lane and the adjacent parking areas with the unremarkable purposefulness of people who knew where they were going, which was the best possible appearance to project. Nobody stopped them. The truck was where he'd left it. He loaded Noah first, then the wheelchair into the bed, then Lily and Ranger jumped in on his own before Ethan could tell him to, which was a quality in the dog he'd always appreciated. He took a route to the library that went 4 blocks out of the way and included a deliberate left turn followed by a U-turn in a gas station lot, which would have looked eccentric to any disinterested observer, but would tell him definitively if someone was maintaining a following distance. Nobody was, as far as he could determine. He pulled into the library lot at 901, backed into a space near the main entrance with the truck's nose facing out, and sat for 3 minutes watching the road. Surveillance detection, Lily said from the passenger seat. Yes, he said. You did that on purpose. The turn at the gas station. Yes. She thought about this. Did anyone follow us? Not that I could identify, he said. That's not the same as no. No, he said. It's not the same as no. She sat with that for a moment. Then she looked at the library entrance glass doors. A woman with a stroller going in, a couple of older men on a bench near the front steps with newspapers, and said, "Okay, just that." Okay, Moore arrived at 924 in a dark blue sedan hers, not a county vehicle, which Ethan noted as a deliberate choice. The woman who got out of the passenger side was in her late 50s, compact, with close-cropped gray hair and the particular quality of stillness in her face that Ethan associated with people who had spent a long time doing hard work and were no longer surprised by how hard it got. She moved with a slight hitch in her left hip, old injury, healed imperfectly, and she was carrying a heavy leather bag over one shoulder that hung lower on that side from the weight of what was inside it. Sandra Holt looked at the truck, looked at Ethan through the windshield. He got out. She crossed the lot toward him with Moore beside her, and when she reached him, she put her hand out and he took it, and she looked at him the way people look at each other when they've heard enough about one another to have formed opinions and are now revising them in real time. I've spent 8 months trying to find these children, she said. No preamble, no pleasantry. I found them by accident, Ethan said. I know. Kay Merritt told me about you. A pause. She said, you're the kind of person who keeps promises. I try to be. Are they okay? He turned and opened the truck's passenger door. Lily was sitting with Noah on her lap. The boy had migrated there at some point in the last 20 minutes, the way small children migrate toward their people without explanation, and she was looking out at the 2 women in the parking lot with the full spectrum assessment running at visible intensity. Lily, Ethan said, this is Sandra Holt. Lily looked at the woman. Sandra Holt looked back at her, and something happened in the woman's expression, not pity, which Lily would have clocked immediately and met with a wall, but something more specific. The expression of someone who is looking at a thing they fought to reach and almost didn't. Hi, Sandra said. Hi, Lily said. A beat. Ellen Stroud asked me to find you, Sandra said. Before she resigned, she made me promise. Lily was quiet. I know you don't know me, Sandra said, and I know that probably doesn't mean much yet. It's okay. You can take whatever time you need. I have something for you, Lily said. From someone who came to the shelter in Milford. She gave it to Noah. The letter, Sandra said. With the torn signature. Lily blinked. Ellen's, Sandra said. She couldn't sign it safely. She told me she'd tried to get it to you. Her voice was steady. She was scared. She's been scared for a while. The parking lot was warm and getting warmer as the morning moved. Car pulled in at the far end. Ethan tracked it, registered it as a family with bikes on the roof rack, released it. Where is she now? Lily asked. Ellen Stroud. Somewhere safe, Sandra said. She's been working with a lawyer for the past 3 months. An attorney who specializes in exactly this kind of situation. She chose the word carefully. What she found. What she documented. It matters, Lily. It's the kind of documentation that doesn't go away. They sealed her complaint, Lily said. They sealed it internally. There are other venues. Sandra held her bag. Can we go inside? I have things to show you, and I'd like to talk somewhere I can spread documents out. Lily looked at Ethan. He gave her nothing. His face, his posture, his silence, all of it was deliberately empty of pressure. Her call. She looked at Sandra Holt for another few seconds. Then she shifted Noah off her lap, stepped down from the truck, and said, "Okay, inside." The library had a meeting room in the back, the kind that could be booked for community events, with a long table and enough chairs and a door that closed. Moore had called ahead, apparently, because a librarian in a yellow cardigan met them at the front desk and walked them back without asking for a reservation name. Ethan appreciated this small act of facilitation. They settled around the table. Noah, who had been given a picture book at the front desk without anyone specifically asking the librarian, had just pressed it in his hands with a matter-of-fact smile, was in his wheelchair at the near end of the table, Ranger beside him, both of them apparently absorbed in an illustration of a great blue heron standing in a marsh. Sandra opened her bag. What she laid out on the table over the next 10 minutes was not a case file in the official sense. It was something denser and less clean. Photographs of documents, printouts of emails that had been forwarded through 3 or 4 removes, a hand-annotated organizational chart with names and arrows connecting entities that appeared on paper to have no relationship to each other. A timeline. The timeline went back 4.5 years. Ethan stood to one side while Sandra walked Lily through it. He was not the audience. For this, Lily was, and his function in this room right now was not to analyze, but to maintain awareness of what was outside the room. He positioned himself with a natural sightline to the door, which had a narrow, rectangular window. He could see the corridor beyond it. He was watching. Moore sat across from Lily and said almost nothing. Lily asked questions, specific questions, not the panicked, comprehensive questions of someone trying to understand everything at once, but targeted questions about particular names, particular dates, particular gaps in the timeline where Sandra's reconstruction had empty space. She was, Ethan thought, running an intelligence analysis. At one point, Sandra paused in the middle of explaining the connection between Crescent Property Management and the county's social services subcontracting budget and said, "How do you know to ask that?" Lily looked at her. "Know to ask what?" "About the audit cycle. You asked whether the funding review happened before or after the Milford shelter changed its intake policy." "That's—" Sandra stopped. "Where did you learn to think like that?" "I've had a lot of time to think," Lily said. Sandra looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at Ethan, and he could read the look, not surprise exactly, more the adjustment that came when reality revised the briefing. He gave her a small nod that said, "I know. I had the same moment." They were 45 minutes into the meeting when the corridor window went dark. Ethan saw it peripherally and was moving before he'd consciously registered why stepping away from the wall, interposing himself between the door and the table in a movement that was smooth and deliberate enough that it didn't alarm the room immediately. Moore looked up first. "What?" He put one hand up, flat, the gesture that means hold position. Then the door opened. It was Farrell. He was in the same clothes as yesterday, which meant he'd been up all night or hadn't gone home, and he had the same clipboard, but there was something different. In his posture, less professional authority, more something unsteadier underneath it. His eyes moved to Lily first, then to Sandra Holt, and something happened in his face when he saw Sandra. A rapid recalibration. The expression of a man who has walked into something that isn't what he expected. "This meeting wasn't disclosed to the county office," he said. "It's a library," Moore said. "People meet in libraries." "Miss Holt," You're from outside this county's jurisdictions. I'm a private individual at a table, Sandra said. Her voice was flat and unreachable, which I'm permitted to be. Farrell looked at Ethan. Mr. Walker, he said, I need to ask you to step outside with me. No, Ethan said. Just that. Clean and without elaboration. I'm going to have to insist. I heard you the first time, Ethan said. And I said no. I'm not going to separate myself from these children based on your insistence. If you have a legal mechanism that requires me to leave this room, produce it. Otherwise, you're just a man standing in a doorway. The room held its breath. Farrell's jaw tightened. He was not a bad man. Ethan had the sense of that, had had it yesterday too, which made this moment more complicated rather than less. He was a man who was used to the framework he worked in, telling him who had authority. And right now, the framework was producing contradictory signals, and he didn't have the equipment to resolve them cleanly. There's been a development, Farrell says. His voice was different now. Lower. What kind of development? Moore asked. He looked at Moore, then at the table, then at Sandra Holt. Gerald Marsh called the county director this morning. He said he's requesting that the Carter case be placed under emergency administrative review. 48-hour hold, no transfers, no external contacts. The room processed this. Sandra sat very still. Moore's expression didn't, but something moved behind her eyes. Lily at the table had gone the particular kind of still that Ethan had come to recognize as her highest threat response, not frozen, never frozen, but compressed into a smaller space, running the calculations. On what grounds? Sandra said. Concerns about the mental and physical welfare of the children during an unauthorized relocation. We didn't relocate. Moore started. 3 miles from a registered contact address during an open protective investigation, Farrell said. He said it like a man reading from a script he doesn't necessarily believe but has committed to. That's the language they're using. They're using, Ethan said. Not you. Farrell looked at him. You said they're requesting, and that's the language they're using, Ethan said. That's deliberate. The silence lasted 4 seconds. I got a call at 6 this morning, Farrell said, from the county director's office. They told me to locate the children and bring them in for the administrative review. He stopped. I've been doing this job for 11 years. I've never had the county director call me directly at 6 in the morning. What are you telling us? Sandra asked. I'm telling you what was requested, Farrell said. I'm not telling you I think it's a valid request. The distinction landed in the room with the weight of a man deciding something. 48 hours, Moore said. If we don't comply, they escalate. Yes. And if they escalate, it goes to a judge who owes Gerald Marsh a favor from 2019, Sandra said, with the flatness of someone who has checked this specific variable. And then we lose control of the case for a period of time, during which documentation becomes significantly harder to access. Yes, Farrell said again. Ethan turned to Sandra. How close are you? The documentation. The lawyer. How close? Sandra looked at him. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked tired. Days, not hours. How maybe 4? 48 hours versus 3 or 4 days. Lily was looking at the organizational chart still spread on the table. The names and arrows. The timeline. She'd been looking at it for the entire duration of the adult conversation, but her eyes hadn't been moving. She'd been listening and processing simultaneously, and now she looked up. The letter, she said. Everyone looked at her. The handwritten letter with the torn signature. Ellen Stroud's letter. She reached into the Ziploc bag, which had been at her elbow on the table for the entire meeting, and produced it. Set it in the center of the table. The signature was torn off, but the paper wasn't just folded. It was pressed look. She pointed to the lower left corner of the page. That's an impression. Someone pressed down on this paper while writing on something else that was on top of it. Sandra leaned forward. If you hold it at an angle to the light, Lily said, you can see it. I've been able to see it since Milford, but I couldn't read it. I thought it was the address of the shelter coming through from a previous letter. But it's not an address. She tilted the page toward the overhead fluorescent light. The impression was faint but legible, the pressed-through ghost of handwriting on a page that had been above this one when someone was writing. A name and a case number. Not Lily and Noah's case number. A different one. Ethan looked at Sandra. Sandra looked at the impression. Her expression did something complicated and very fast. Then it settled. That's the Alderman case, she said. That closed 18 months ago. Administratively resolved. She looked at Lily. How long have you been able to read that impression? About 6 weeks, Lily said. I didn't know what it was. You've been carrying it for 6 weeks. I carry a lot of things, Lily said. Sandra sat back in her chair. She put both hands flat on the table, the same posture Lily used. Ethan noticed when something had just shifted the weight of a room. The Alderman case, Sandra said, mostly to herself. If that case was tied to the same administrative chain, it doubles the exposure, Moore said quietly. It more than doubles it, Sandra said. It establishes a pattern. She looked at Ethan. I need to call the attorney. Right now. Use this room, he said. She was already reaching for her phone. Farrell was standing in the doorway with the clipboard at his side and the expression of a man who has just watched the ground rearrange itself under his feet. He looked at Moore. I came here to follow a directive, he said. I know, Moore said. I'm not sure I'm going to, he said. I know, Moore said again. Ethan looked at Noah. The boy had set the picture book down on his lap and was watching the adults with the quiet attentiveness of a child who doesn't know the specifics, but knows this is a moment that matters. His hand had drifted to Ranger's head, which was resting on the wheelchair's armrest, and his fingers were in the dog's fur. Ranger was looking at Ethan. The dog had the same expression he always had present, reading the room, waiting for the next thing that would tell him what was needed. Good boy, Ethan said quietly. Ranger's tail moved once. Just once. Sandra was already talking to someone on her phone in a low, rapid voice, the leather bag pulled close, one hand flat on the organizational chart on the table. And Lily, 10 years old, with her hands folded in front of her and her chin level and her eyes steady, looked at Ethan and said, It's going to work. He looked at her. I know that's not something you can say for certain, she said, but I'm saying it anyway. Yeah, he said. Sometimes you just have to say it, she said. Yeah, he said again, you do. The fluorescent light hummed. Sandra's voice moved through the room in fragments. As outside the meeting room door, the library went about its morning without any knowledge of what was happening in the back corner, behind the door with the narrow window. Noah put his nose against Ranger's ear and whispered something to the dog that no one else heard. Ranger's tail moved again, slower this time, satisfied. And in the particular quality of that moment, not triumphant, not clean, just real and present and still moving, something had changed that couldn't be changed back. Sandra's call lasted 19 minutes. Ethan knew because he timed it not obsessively, just the way he timed everything that mattered, the habit of a man who had spent years in situations where the difference between 19 minutes and 22 minutes was the difference between outcomes. He stood near the door with his sight line to the corridor and listened to the half of the conversation he could hear, which was enough to build a reasonable picture of the other half. The attorney's name was Reeves, Carolyn Reeves. Sandra said it twice during the call, clearly, in the way you say a name when you want everyone in the room to hear it and remember it. Whether that was deliberate or unconscious, Ethan filed it either way. What he could reconstruct from Sandra's end, Reeves already had the core documentation. She had been waiting on one additional element to establish the pattern of administrative misconduct across multiple cases rather than a single incident of mismanagement. A single incident could be explained. A pattern with a second case number attached to the Alderman case, the name pressed into the bottom of Ellen Stroud's letter, was a different category of problem for the people who had built the system around Gerald Marsh's interests. When Sandra ended the call, she set her phone on the table and pressed both palms flat against the surface and breathed out. She needs the impression documented, Sandra said. Photographed under angle lighting, then she needs the original in her hands by tomorrow morning. How far is she? Ethan asked. 4 hours north. She was already driving this direction last night. Sandra looked at the letter on the table. She'll be here by this afternoon. And the 48-hour administrative hold? Moore said. Reeves says that if we can get the documentation to her before Marsh's people go to the judge, she can file an injunction that will hold the case at the state level, out of county jurisdiction entirely. How confident is she? Sandra looked at him. confident enough that she drove 4 hours last night on 7 hours' notice. Farrell had moved from the doorway to a chair at the far end of the table. He'd set the clipboard down, not dramatically, just placed it on the table beside him like something he was done carrying. He had the look of a man who was in the process of making an irreversible decision and knew it. If I don't report back to the county director's office by noon, he said, they're going to assume I found the children, and they're going to send someone else. What do you want to do? Moore asked. He looked at his clipboard, the children, at Sandra's organizational chart with its arrows and names. I want to do my job, he said, the actual version of my job, which I haven't been doing cleanly because I didn't have full information. He paused. I'm going to call the director back and tell him I located the children and I'm conducting the welfare assessment, which I am. That's true. Another pause. I'll need until this afternoon. That's not a long window, Sandra said. No, Farrell said. It isn't. So I'd suggest we move quickly. There was a shift in the room after that, the quality of air that changes when people who have been on uncertain footing reach a provisional alignment. Not trust, exactly. Not yet. More like a temporary shared direction that everyone understood might not outlast the afternoon. Lily, who had been watching all of this with her hands folded on the table and her face doing its careful neutral thing, said, "What do you need from us?" Sandra looked at her. The letter. Photographs first, then the original when Reeves arrives. Okay, and I need to know everything you remember about the woman who gave it to Noah, the shelter in Milford. What she looked like, what she said, whether anyone saw her give it to him. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said she was maybe 40, dark hair cut short. She had a scar on her left hand like a burn old one, pinkish. She paused. She said, "Don't let anyone take that notebook." She pointed at Noah's notebook, the drawing one. And then she gave him the letter folded into a square and told him to put it in his sock until he could give it to me. She said, "Your sister will know what to keep." The room was silent. "She knew your name," Sandra said. "She knew I was his sister. I don't know if she knew my name. What happened to her? Did you see her again?" She walked back around the corner of the building, and I didn't see her again. Noah watched for her for 2 days. Lily's voice stayed even. He thought she was nice. She was taking a risk, Sandra said quietly. A significant one. I know, Lily said. You've known all along that what she gave him was important. I didn't know exactly what it was. But yes, I knew it was important. She looked at Sandra directly. That's why I kept it dry. Sandra looked down at the table for a moment. Ethan had seen that expression on people before, the expression of someone who has been working toward something for a long time and has just arrived at the place where the work starts to mean something. And it's not triumphant, it's just heavy in a way that's different from all the other kinds of heavy. Okay, Sandra said. She reached for her camera, a small digital one she'd produced from the leather bag, and positioned the letter on the white paper surface of a legal pad she'd set beside it. Let's document this properly. Reeves arrived at 2:14 in the afternoon in a dark gray car that was clean but not new, wearing a blazer that had spent time in a garment bag and hadn't fully recovered. She was compact and fast-moving, and somewhere in her mid-40s, with reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead and a litigation bag that made Sandra's leather satchel look casual. She shook hands with everyone in the room and then sat down without ceremony and said to Sandra, "Show me the impression." Sandra showed her. Reeves looked at it for 40 seconds without speaking. Then she took a photograph of her own, set the letter inside a clear evidence sleeve she produced from the litigation bag, and said, "Alderman, I knew something was wrong with that case." "You knew the Alderman case?" Sandra said. "I had a client who tried to access records related to it 8 months ago. Hit a wall." She looked at the organizational chart. "This is your work. 8 months of it. It's good." Reeves was already moving through the chart with her finger, tracing lines. "This connection here between HFA and the county commissioner's office, how did you establish it?" "Board minutes." HFA is a nonprofit. Their board minutes are public record. Marsh attended 4 meetings in the year before he left office. Not as a board member, as a guest. Sandra paused. There's no record of why he was invited. There doesn't need to be. The attendance establishes the relationship. Combined with the funding chain, Reeves sat back. combined with 2 case files that show the same administrative fingerprint and an internal complaint that was sealed within 14 days of being filed, this is a pattern, a documentable one. Enough for an injunction? Moore asked. Enough for an injunction and significantly more if I do this right. Reeves looked at Moore. Who are you in this? Harlan County CPS. Case coordinator. You're on record in this case? Since yesterday morning, and you're here voluntarily, not following a directive from the county director's office. I'm conducting a welfare assessment, Moore said, in a tone that suggested she'd thought carefully about how to frame this. Smart, Reeves said. Not as a compliment, as an observation. She turned to Ethan. And you, civilian, he said. Former Navy. I found the kids on the road 2 nights ago. She looked at him with the assessing gaze of someone who has spent years reading witnesses. You've been primary protective contact for 40-plus hours. Yes. Any legal relationship to the children? Guardian, godparent, anything on paper? No. You willing to go on record? Affidavit. Your account of the past 48 hours, including the conduct of county CPS, the anonymous report, the vehicle you documented in the parking lot. Yes, he said. The plate traces back to Crescent Property Management, according to my contact. The trace isn't official. It doesn't need to be official at this stage. It needs to be documentable enough for a judge to order an official trace. She looked at Farrell, who had been sitting at his end of the table, with the particular quiet of a man who is reconsidering the shape of his career. Mr. Farrell, you're the one who received the directive from the county director. Yes, Farrell said. At 6 in the morning. Yes, directly. Not through normal channels. The director doesn't normally call care workers directly, Farrell said. That's it, goes through supervisors. That's standard procedure. And the directive was to locate the children and bring them in under emergency administrative review. That's correct. In your professional judgment, was that directive consistent with the documented situation as you understood it? Farrell was quiet for a moment. No, he said, it wasn't. Reeves nodded once. I'm going to need that in writing. She looked around the table. I'm going to need all of it in writing today before I file, which means we're going to be here for a while. She pulled the litigation bag onto the table. Does anyone need coffee before we start? The afternoon was long and unglamorous. Ethan had been in after-action reviews that felt like this, the sustained, careful, slightly tedious work of constructing a precise account of events from multiple perspectives, cross-referencing timelines, identifying gaps and filling them with documented evidence rather than assumption. The work that came after the moment. Less dramatic than the moment itself, and in some ways harder because it required a different kind of endurance. The librarian in the yellow cardigan brought them a tray of coffee at some point without anyone asking. Ethan left a 20 on the table beside it. Farrell called the county director's office at 12:47 and reported that he was conducting a welfare assessment and expected to be available by late afternoon. The director's assistant, not the director himself, said that was satisfactory for now. Farrell ended the call and looked at his hands for a moment before picking up his pen again. Noah slept in his wheelchair for about an hour in the early afternoon, his head tilted back at the particular angle children achieve in sleep that looks anatomically improbable and apparently isn't. Ranger lay under the table with his head on his paws and didn't move. Lily gave her account to Reeves in direct, sequential order without being prompted to organize it that way. She just produced it organized. The same way she kept the notebook, the same way she'd maintained the Ziploc bag. Reeves stopped her twice to ask for clarification on dates and was twice given more specificity than she'd asked for. How are you sure about the dates? Reeves asked after the second time. Professional curiosity, not skepticism. I kept a log, Lily said. Starting when? When we left the last stable place. She pulled the black notebook from the backpack. It's in here. All of it. Names, what happened, who we talked to. Reeves looked at the notebook. Can I see it? Lily held it, looked at it, then slid it across the table. Reeves opened it and read the first page. Then turned to another page. Not randomly, she went to a specific entry based on a date she'd been focused on, which meant she was cross-referencing against something already in her head. She read, closed the notebook, slid it back. That's the most useful document in this room, she said. I need a photocopy of every page. The library had a copier. The librarian in the yellow cardigan handled it without being asked twice. Ethan watched Lily watch the notebook disappear into the copier and come back page by page, and understood without being told what it cost her to let it out of her hands even briefly. It was the same thing. The Ziploc bag was not just a record. Proof that the time had mattered, that the moving and the managing and the keeping things dry had been real and had been worth something. You didn't let go of that easily, even when letting go of it was the right move. She took it back when the copies were done and put it directly into the backpack without opening it again. At 3:40, Reeves had enough to file. She said so plainly, without performance. She was packing her litigation bag with the focused efficiency of someone for whom this moment was a transition point rather than a destination. I'm going to a federal courthouse, she said. Not county. State court would normally be the right venue, but given the county-level corruption angle, I want a federal docket. It's slower in some ways, but it's clean. Nobody in that courthouse owes Gerald Marsh anything. How long for the injunction? Sandra asked. Filing today, emergency motion. If the judge is available, and I'm persuasive, end of business tomorrow. Maybe sooner. She looked at Moore. In the meantime, the children need to be in a documented safe placement. Officially. Documented as what? Moore said. Our options within county are compromised. Walker Reeves said, looking at Ethan. What about him? Moore said. Emergency kinship placement. It's a regulatory category. It doesn't require a formal foster license in the first 72 hours. It requires that the placement be with someone known to the children, that there's documented welfare basis, and that a supervising caseworker signs off. She looked at Moore. Moore looked at Ethan, then at Lily. Lily, you'd be comfortable with that arrangement? Lily looked at Ethan. Ethan held her gaze and said nothing. Not because he didn't have something to say, he had several things to say, but because none of them were appropriate to push into the space where her decision needed to be made. Yes, Lily said, I'd be comfortable with that. Moore picked up her pen. Farrell said, I'll co-sign it. Everyone looked at him. He shrugged slightly. I've been conducting the welfare assessment. It's in my documentation. It's the right call. A pause. Somebody should make the right call at some point today. Moore signed. Farrell signed. Reeves took the form, added it to the litigation bag, and stood. I'll be in contact when I have the injunction filed, she said. Keep your phones on. She looked at Sandra. Both of you. She looked at Lily last. You've done good work, she said. Not in the warm, generic way adults say that to children. In the way you say it to someone whose work actually made a difference to the outcome. Lily met her eyes. Okay, she said. Reeves left. The room felt different in her absence, as not emptier, just settled into itself differently, the way a room feels after the person who was organizing its energy has stepped out. What came next was less dramatic and more difficult. Moore had to make calls. Farrell had to file his assessment. Sandra needed to coordinate with Ellen Stroud's attorney about the second case number. All of it had to happen before the county director's patience ran out, and he sent someone with a harder mandate than Dennis Farrell's. Ethan stepped out of the meeting room and walked to the library's front entrance and stood outside in the afternoon air, which was warm and slightly damp and smelled like cut grass from somewhere nearby. He put his back to the building and looked at the parking lot and the road beyond it and breathed. He was running on about 20 hours without sleep, which was not unusual for him and was also not something he'd recommend. His eyes felt gritty. His thinking was still clear. He knew the edge well enough to know he hadn't reached it, but the emotional processing was lagging, which meant things he hadn't had time to feel during the morning were starting to arrive in his chest with the delayed punctuality of mail from a difficult address. He thought about the names in Sandra's organizational chart. He thought about the man in the sedan. He thought about Farrell's face when he said somebody should make the right call at some point today, and the specific kind of decency that statement required in that room, in that context. He thought about Lily's notebook, every page of it. He was still standing there when the door opened and Lily came out. She stood beside him without preamble, looked at the parking lot. The road. Noah's awake, she said. He's okay. Moore's with him. Okay, a pause. You didn't sleep last night, she said. We've established that. You should sleep tonight. Probably, he said. You should. She was quiet for a moment. How long do you do this before it catches up with you? Do what? The not sleeping, the watching the parking lot. That she gestured vaguely at his general bearing. All of it. He considered an honest answer. Longer than is good for me, he said. That's as accurate as I can get. She looked at the road. After my parents, she stopped. Started again differently. When it was just me and Noah. The first weeks. I didn't sleep either. Kept thinking if I stopped watching, something would happen. Did it get better? Mostly. When I figured out that watching didn't actually stop things from happening. She paused. It just made me more tired when they did. Ethan looked at her. That's a harder thing to learn than it sounds, he said. Yeah, she said. It is. They stood in the afternoon for a minute. A car went past on the road. A kid on a bicycle. The cut grass smell drifted in from wherever it was coming from. My parents weren't. It wasn't anything dramatic, Lily said, without looking at him. The tone of someone who has been carrying something in private so long it's started to be less about the content and more about the weight. They weren't bad people. Things just ran out. Money. Options. My dad left and then my mom couldn't manage it alone and then she tried. She really tried. A pause. But trying isn't always enough. No, Ethan said. It isn't. People always want there to be someone to blame. But sometimes it's just cumulative. One thing, and then another thing, and then another, and eventually the structure just can't hold. I understand that, he said. She looked at him sideways. Your team, she said. The people you lost. Yeah. Was there someone to blame? He thought about the honest answer for a moment. There were decisions, he said, that were made by people who didn't have full information. And some of them made it home, and some of them didn't, and the line between those two groups was about 6 inches in one direction or another. He paused. No single villain, just wait. Same as what you're describing. Lily was quiet. The difference, Ethan said, is I had 14 months and a truck and a dog and open roads. You had your brother and a broken wheelchair and a waterproof bag. He looked at the parking lot. You managed significantly better than I did. I didn't have a choice, she said. Neither did I, he said. But you still did it better. She didn't argue. She also didn't agree. She just looked at the road with the expression of someone filing information under a category they haven't fully labeled yet. What happens after this? She asked. When Reeves gets the injunction. When Sandra's finished. The case goes to state oversight, he said. Outside county control. Sandra and Holt work with the state to establish a proper placement. One that keeps you and Noah together. And Gerald Marsh? That depends on what Reeves finds when she gets into the Alderman case. If the pattern holds, there are people at the state level who will want to know. He paused. It's not quick. These things are never quick. I know, she said. I know they're not quick. But it moves, he said. That's the part that's different from before. It moves, and it moves in the right direction. She considered this. Where do we go tonight? She said. Somewhere I pick, he said. Not in Harlan County. And I won't write it down anywhere connected to the case until Reeves has filed. She nodded. Will you? She stopped. He waited. Will you be there? She said. Not just tonight, the process, the state oversight. Will you be part of that? He understood what the question cost her. He understood that asking it required a specific kind of willingness to be disappointed, and that a person who has been disappointed consistently will ask that kind of question with their whole face held carefully still, the way you hold still when the doctor is about to tell you something. Yes, he said, I'll be there. She looked at him. That's a commitment, she said. I know what a commitment is, he said. The door opened behind them and Moore leaned out. Farrell's wrapping up the documentation. We're almost ready in here. Coming, Ethan said. Lily straightened up, turned toward the door, then stopped. Ethan. He looked at her. Noah asked me this morning while you were on the phone, he asked me if you were going to stay. She paused. I told him I didn't know yet. What does he say? He said Ranger would stay. So you'd have to. She looked at him. He thinks that's a solid argument. Something moved in Ethan's chest that he did not try to name or contain or translate into something more manageable. He's not wrong, Ethan said. The corner of Lily's mouth did something brief and complicated and real. She went back inside. The rest of the afternoon was administrative and imperfect. Farrell got a second call from the director's office at 4, 15 more urgent this time, the assistant replaced by the director himself, a man named Colton who spoke in the measured cadences of someone accustomed to being obeyed and was finding the current situation mildly destabilizing. Farrell told him the welfare assessment was complete. The children were in a documented placement, and he would have the full report on the director's desk by morning. Colton asked for the placement address. Farrell said that disclosing placement addresses to non-essential personnel was a violation of the children's privacy under state welfare regulations, and that the director was welcome to take that up with the supervising attorney if he had concerns. Colton was quiet for several seconds. Then he said he expected the report by 8 Mew Farrell said he'd have it there. He ended the call and looked at Moore with the expression of a man who has just done something that cannot be undone and is at peace with it in a grudging, slightly nauseated way. Going to call Marsh, Moore said. He's already called Marsh, Farrell said. He called Marsh before he called me. How do you know? Because the first thing he asked me was whether Sandra Holt was present at the assessment. He paused. I didn't tell anyone Sandra was going to be here. The room processed this. Sandra looked at the organizational chart, the name at the top of it. He's going to move tonight, Sandra said. Try to. What can he actually do at this point? Moore asked. Less than he could this morning. Reeves said she was still there, laptop working through the filing, but not nothing. He knows the Alderman case number is in play now, which means he knows the scope of what's going to come out. People in that position sometimes do things that aren't rational, such as, Moore asked, attempt to recover the original documents, discredit the witnesses, apply pressure to the judge's clerk before I can file. She paused. None of which will work at this point. But that doesn't always stop people. Should we be worried? Lily asked. She'd been at the table quiet for the last hour listening. Everyone looked at her. For tonight? Reeves said. Not if you're not in Harlan County. She looked at Ethan. You said you were taking them somewhere else. Yes. Don't tell me where, she said. Don't tell Moore either. If anyone asks, you have a placement address that's been communicated to the supervising caseworker, and that's all anyone needs to know. Understood, Ethan said. At 5:30, Sandra said she needed to make a call to Ellen Stroud. She stepped out, and through the meeting room's interior window, Ethan could see her standing in the library stacks, phone to her ear, one hand against the shelving, talking to someone who had taken a significant risk to move a piece of paper from a shelter in Milford to a 5-year-old's sock, and had then disappeared back around a corner into whatever diminished version of her own life remained. He didn't know what Sandra said to her. He only saw Sandra when he came back in, and Sandra's face had the particular quality of having just been a place that required something from you that you had. She's okay, Sandra said, mostly to herself. Good, Moore said. Lily looked at Sandra and did not ask any more questions, which was its own kind of grace. They packed up the table at 6 o'clock. Documents bagged, chart rolled, notebooks and laptops and litigation bags back into their respective carriers. The librarian came by to check on the room and said nothing about the unusual duration of their occupation of it. Noah woke up from his second short sleep of the afternoon to find Ranger sitting up beside his Wolf with the attentiveness of a dog who knows something is about to happen. Are we going? Noah asked. We're going, Lily said. Where? Somewhere Ethan picked, she said. Noah looked at Ethan. Is there a yard? I don't know yet, Ethan said. I want a yard, Noah said, with the specificity of someone who has thought about this. Not huge, just big enough for Ranger to run. I'll see what I can do, Ethan said. And breakfast things, Noah said. Like eggs, Lily said. I'm just saying, Noah said. He's not wrong, Ethan said. Those are reasonable requirements. Lily shook her head, but the way she did it was not the same as the way she'd shaken her head at anything for the past 2 days. Something in it was lighter. Not all the way light, nothing was all the way light yet, and anyone who had been paying attention knew better than to pretend otherwise. But lighter, in the specific way a thing gets lighter when some of its weight has been down in the might, and the people carrying it have gotten to rest, briefly, in a room where other people knew what they were carrying. Farrell held the door. Ethan pushed Noah's wheelchair through it, and Lily walked beside them, and Ranger moved at the boy's left wheel with the steady, reliable presence he'd maintained since Ethan had first told him to stay in the truck, and he'd stayed until it mattered, and then he'd been exactly where he needed to be. Outside, the afternoon had gone golden in the way of early evenings in late summer-long light, long shadow, the particular quality of end of day that makes ordinary things look considered. Moore stopped beside Ethan at the truck. "I'm going to need to know you're reachable," she said. "Not the address. Just reachable. You have my number," he said. "I need to know you're going to stay in this," she said, more quietly, for them. "Not just tonight," he looked at her. "I told Lily I would be," he said. Moore studied him for a moment. "Okay," she said. "That's good enough for me." She walked back to her car. Farrell got in his and sat for a moment before starting the engine, and through the windshield, Ethan could see him looking at something on the dashboard, not the road, not his phone. Just a fixed point, the way you look at something when you are recalibrating where you stand. Then Farrell started the engine and backed out. Ethan got Noah settled in the truck, wheelchair secured, Ranger in the back. He was about to get in the driver's side when his phone buzzed. A text, not a call. Filed. Emergency motion. Judge Carver's clerk confirmed receipt 6:02 p.m. Hearing scheduled 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'd call that a good evening. He read it. Typed back. Copy that. He got in the truck. "Good news?" Lily asked. She'd been watching his face. "Good news," he said. She looked out the windshield at the golden evening. "Okay," she said. Ethan started the engine. From the back seat, Noah said, "Ranger's happy. His ears are up." Ethan checked the rear view. The dog's ears were indeed up, not in the alert threat posture, just up, bright forward. Posture of a dog moving toward something. "Yeah," Ethan said. "He is." He pulled out of the library parking lot as the light went long and warm across the road ahead of them, and he drove north, away from Harlan County, toward the place he'd had in mind since that morning when he'd started thinking about what the next 24 hours needed to look like: a cabin that belonged to a teammate's family, empty this time of year, in a county where nobody knew their names and the land ran wide and flat, and there was, as it happened, a yard. Not huge, just big enough. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel road that didn't appear on the navigation app, which was how Ethan knew it from memory: the left turn after the grain silo, the second cattle gate, the tree line that opened up unexpectedly into flat land, and a low wooden structure with a covered porch and a yard that ran out to a fence line maybe 80 feet back. It was 9:30 when they arrived. The stars were out. Noah had fallen asleep somewhere in the last 40 miles and woke when the truck stopped with the particular confusion of a child displaced in time and space, looking at the dark shapes of trees and unfamiliar sky, and then at Ranger, and then at Lily, and then settling. "Is this it?" he asked. Ethan said. "It has a porch," Noah said. "It does." Noah looked at the yard in the dark. "Is that a fence?" "Yes. How big is the yard?" "Big enough," Ethan said. Noah accepted this with the satisfaction of a prediction confirmed. The key was where his teammate's family always left it: third flagstone from the steps, the one that sat slightly higher than the others. He found it without a flashlight and had the door open in 10 seconds. The cabin smelled like cedar and disuse and the faint ghost of someone else's cooking from months ago. He turned on the lamp by the door, and the room came up: warm wood floors, a couch with mismatched cushions, a kitchen that was small and honest, 2 bedrooms off the back hallway. He put Lily and Noah in the larger one without discussion. 2 beds, which mattered. A window that faced the yard. He took the couch. Reeves calls at 8:47 the next morning. Ethan was on the porch with bad instant coffee when the phone rang, watching Ranger move through the yard in long, easy arcs, nose down, reading whatever the night had left in the grass. Behind him, through the screen door, he could hear Lily in the kitchen, the sounds of cabinet doors, the specific way she moved through an unfamiliar space with deliberate care, learning it. Noah was at the window he'd woken up at, watching the dog. Judge Carver reviewed the emergency motion at 7 a.m. Reeves said, "The injunction is granted. The Carter case is now under state-level oversight. Harlan County has no jurisdiction." Ethan put his coffee down. "Marsh," he said. "The state attorney general's office was copied on the filing this morning." The Alderman case connection is being reviewed independently. A pause. Marsh's attorney contacted mine at 6:30 a.m., offering a voluntary cooperation with the state review in exchange for, I'll summarize it, as significant concessions. He's trying to get ahead of it. He is. He's not going to get as far ahead of it as he'd like. The cooperation offer suggests he knows how much is documented. She paused. Ellen Stroud's attorney filed a separate complaint with the State Bar this morning regarding the sealed internal report. That process runs independently, but it runs. And the children? Sandra Holt is the assigned state coordinator as of this morning. She has full case authority. Reeves' voice shifted slightly, not warmer exactly, but less operational. She's asking if she can come out today, to talk to Lily directly, about what comes next. Ethan looked through the screen door at the kitchen sounds. I'll ask, he said. There's one more thing, Reeves said. He waited. The original caseworker. Ellen Stroud. She wants to speak with Lily. When Lily's ready, not before. Sandra will facilitate it whenever that is. A pause. She said to tell the girl, and I'm quoting this because Sandra was specific about the wording she said to tell her. The promise was always going to be kept. It just took longer than it should have. Ethan stood on the porch and looked at the yard and at the dog moving through it and at the fence line and the flat land beyond. I'll pass that on, he said. He told Lily at the kitchen table over eggs, actual eggs, because there had been a half-full carton in the cabin's small refrigerator alongside a stick of butter and a jar of hot sauce, and Lily had found them and made eggs without announcing she was going to, which was the way she did most things. Noah was eating with the focused pleasure of someone who had requested something specific and received it. Ethan told her about the injunction first, the jurisdiction transfer, what it meant in practical terms. She listened and didn't stop eating, which was good. Marsh, she said, cooperating, which means running damage control. Does he go to prison? I don't know, Ethan said. The Attorney General's office is involved now. Where it goes depends on what they find. He paused. I won't tell you he definitely faces consequences. I don't know that. She ate for a moment. But it's on record, she said. All of it. And it can't be sealed again. Not at the state level, no. She set her fork down. Picked it up again. The specific fidget of someone who is managing a feeling they're not sure they want to have yet. Ellen Stroud wants to talk to me, Ethan said. When you're ready. No timeline on that. Lily was quiet. She sent a message, he said. Sandra said to tell you exactly. The promise was always going to be kept. It just took longer than it should have. The kitchen was quiet except for Noah's fork against his plate and the sound of Ranger outside, somewhere in the yard. Lily put her fork down and didn't pick it up again. She was looking at the table. Her face was doing the thing it did when something was moving through it that she hadn't had a chance to sort yet, the locked surface, the careful stillness. But her hands were different. They weren't flat on the table in the threat assessment posture. They were in her lap. Loosely. The posture of someone who has put something down. Okay, she said, very quietly. Noah looked at her. He had egg on his chin and the notebook on the chair beside him, open to the house drawing the same house, new version, slightly more detailed than the others. This version had a porch. Lily, he said. I'm okay, she said. You look like when you're trying not to cry, he said, matter of fact. The diagnosis of someone who has extensive data on the subject. I know, she said. I'm okay. He looked at her for a moment with the serious evaluative expression of a 5-year-old taking a reading. Then he reached over and put his small hand on her arm and left it there and went back to his eggs. Ethan looked at his coffee cup. Some things didn't need annotation. Sandra arrived at noon. She came alone, as she'd said she would, in the same car as the day before. She brought food not as charity. She was clear about that. She just said she'd stopped, and there was a deli, and she'd gotten too much, which was probably true and possibly also not entirely true, and Lily accepted it with the same pragmatic grace she applied to most things. They sat on the porch. All of them, more or less Sandra and Lily in the 2 chairs, Ethan on the porch steps, Noah in his wheelchair at the porch's edge where he could watch Ranger in the yard. Sandra talked to Lily about what state oversight meant in practical terms. Timeline. The type of placement they were working toward, not a temporary shelter, not a transitional facility, but a licensed foster arrangement with a family that had been specifically vetted for sibling placements, for children with medical needs, for situations that required stability over an extended period. How long is extended? Lily asked. As long as it needs to be, Sandra said. The goal is permanence. That's the legal word for it, permanence, which means you stop moving. Lily looked at the yard. And Noah's medical situation, she said, is part of the placement criteria, Sandra said. It's not a complicating factor. It's a requirement that any placement has to meet. People have said that before, Lily said. And then, I know, Sandra said, I know they have. I'm not asking you to trust me on the basis of what I've said. I'm asking you to trust what's on paper, the state order, the placement criteria, the documented case history that is now, as of this morning, attached to your names in a system that Harlan County cannot touch. Lily looked at her. That's different from before, Lily said. Yes, Sandra said, it's different from before. A long pause. The yard. Ranger finding something interesting near the fence post and investigating it with the full gravity of his professional nose. When? Lily asked. A few weeks to complete the placement vetting. You stay here if Ethan's willing until then. They both looked at Ethan. Yes, he said. He hadn't needed to think about it. Sandra nodded. In the meantime, I want to set up Noah's medical assessment. There's a specialist at the university hospital in the next county. Someone who actually knows his condition and isn't working from a general practitioner's notes. He's never seen someone who specifically started. I know, Sandra said. That changes. Lily looked at her hands. At the porch railing. At Noah, who was narrating something to Ranger about the fence post situation in a low, continuous monologue that the dog appeared to be following with great interest. What about school? Lily said. When you're placed, yes. Both of you. I've missed a lot. You've also demonstrated, Sandra said carefully, a fairly remarkable capacity for independent learning. The school system will catch up to you, not the other way around. Lily almost disputed this, then didn't. Okay, she said, for what felt like the 100th time, but different now. Each okay she'd said over the past 3 days had carried different weight. This one was the lightest. Not because it was small, because it wasn't carrying the whole of everything behind it anymore. Sandra left at 2. The afternoon settled into the kind of quiet that follows significant events, not empty quiet, but the full kind, the kind that has something in it besides absence. Ethan fixed the porch step that had been soft since they arrived, because it was something concrete to do, and the wood and the hammer and the nails gave his hands something to manage while the rest of him processed what the last 3 days had been. Lily read. She had found a paperback on the cabin's bookshelf, a detective novel, the unpretentious kind, with a broken spine from someone else's reading, and she sat in the porch chair and read it in the particular absorbed way that indicated she wasn't thinking about the book at all, but the book was giving her mind somewhere to be while it worked through other things. That was okay. Noah fell asleep in the yard, in his wheelchair, in the afternoon sun, with Ranger lying across his feet like a weighted blanket. Ethan had watched it happen, the boy's head drifting, the book sliding off his lap, the dog moving without instruction to position himself for exactly that purpose, and Noah's hand finding the dog's ear in his sleep and staying there. He took a photograph, not for any official purpose, just because some things deserved a record. 4 in the afternoon, Lily set the book down and said, I want to call Ellen Stroud. Ethan looked up from the step he'd been reseating. Now, yes. She paused. I've been waiting until I was ready, and I figured out that waiting until I'm ready means waiting forever. So now, he got Sandra on the phone. Sandra got Ellen Stroud on a 3-way call within 10 minutes. Ethan went to the far end of the yard. He didn't listen. That was not his conversation. He could see Lily on the porch through the distance, sitting upright, phone to her ear, her free hand on the armrest of the chair. She talked. She listened. She talked again. Once she pressed the back of her hand against her mouth briefly in the way people do when they're keeping something in, and then her hand came down and she kept talking. It lasted 22 minutes. When she ended the call, she sat with the phone in her lap for a moment. Then she looked across the yard at Ethan. He walked back. He didn't ask. He sat down on the repaired porch step and waited. She cried, Lily said. She didn't want to, but she did. Yeah, Ethan said. She said she was sorry it took so long. Were you okay with what she said? Lily thought about it. I don't know yet, but I'm glad I called. She paused. She sounds like someone who actually meant it. What she tried to do. I think she did, Ethan said. You don't know her. No, but I know what it costs to try to do something right in a broken system and have it go wrong anyway. And I know what people sound like when they're carrying that. He paused. It has a specific sound. Lily looked at him. Yeah, she said. It does. The afternoon went long and gold the same way it had the day before, the light doing the thing it did at this particular hour in this particular season, making everything look considered, intentional, like someone had made specific decisions about where the shadows would fall. Noah woke up and immediately wanted to know if there was anything sweet in the cabin. There was half a bag of chocolate chips in the back of the pantry, the baking kind, which Ethan presented with appropriate ceremony. Noah ate a small handful and gave one to Ranger, who accepted it with the dignity of an animal that maintains standards about what it considers appropriate. Ranger likes chocolate, Noah announced. Small amounts, Ethan said. Not a regular thing. Everything good is not a regular thing, Noah said, with the philosophical resignation of a 5-year-old who has heard this before. That's accurate, Lily said. 3 weeks later, the placement came through. Family named Okafor, in a town 40 miles north Marcus and Delia, 2 grown children already out of the house, a rambling property with a garden and a dog of their own, a 1-story layout with wide doorways, because Delia's mother used a wheelchair and always had. Sandra had sent Lily their information before the formal introduction, and Lily had read every word of it twice, and then asked 3 specific questions about Noah's medical access and the school district's special education provisions, and Sandra had answered all 3 in writing. First visit was a Tuesday. Ethan drove them. The Okafors were not perfect. Delia talked too much when she was nervous. Marcus had a handshake that was too firm, and a laugh that arrived slightly before the joke did, but they were real, which was more important than perfect. And the way Delia showed Noah the garden, without making a production of the wheelchair navigation cheat-in, told Ethan everything he needed to know about whether they'd been paying attention to what they'd been told about him. Noah's dog, the Okafor's dog, a large lazy retriever named Biscuit, who had apparently never met an energy level he couldn't bring down, introduced himself by flopping across Noah's feet within the first 4 minutes of their acquaintance, which was a technique Ethan recognized from Ranger and appreciated as effective. Lily walked through the house with Sandra, asking questions, taking in the rooms. The bedroom that would be hers had a window that faced the garden. She stood at it for a moment and looked out. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. On the last night at the cabin, Ethan sat on the porch after the children were asleep, and Ranger was inside, and the yard was just a yard in the dark. And he thought about what 14 months of driving had been for, and whether this was an answer to that question or something else entirely. He didn't arrive at a clean conclusion. That was okay. He thought about his team. He thought about the 6 inches in one direction or another that separated who made it home and who didn't. He thought about a wet gravel shoulder and a broken wheelchair wheel and a dog who woke up and made him stop. He thought about a 10-year-old who kept things dry. In the morning, when they were loading the truck, Noah asked him, "Are you going to visit?" "Yes," Ethan said. "A lot enough." Noah evaluated this. "Ranger too?" "Ranger goes where I go." "Then okay," Noah said. "That's okay." Lily was the last one to the truck. She stood beside it with her backpack over one shoulder and the Ziploc bag inside it. Because old habits don't vanish just because the emergency is over, they just go quiet. She looked at the cabin, at the porch with its repaired step. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said. "I want to. There's a difference." Ethan nodded. She looked at him for a moment with the same full-spectrum assessment she'd run on him at the roadside market in the rain, when she'd put herself between him and her brother and told him not to come closer. But this time the assessment concluded differently. "You're a good person," she said. Not like a child says it, like someone who has done the work to know what the words mean and is using them accurately. He didn't have an answer for that. He thought he probably didn't need one. Some months later, on a Saturday in early spring, Ethan returned to the stretch of county road where the roadside market still stood with its rusted awning and its sputtering security light. He didn't have a particular reason to be there. He was driving. Ranger was in the back. The radio was off. He pulled onto the gravel shoulder. The market looked the same. The light above the entrance still flickered with the stubborn incandescence of something that has decided not to give up. He sat for a moment. Then he drove on. Some roads only go in one direction, and the only thing to do with that is drive them. The children no one stopped for are still out there. You don't need a mission or a title or a plan. You just need to stop long enough to see them. That's where it starts every single time.